Hello, welcome. We made it. It is Monday, the 24th of July, 2023, I think. Gonky's with me. His internet
still
is held
here.
up yet another week. Yeah,
I'm still here.
I know. Very successful. Very
Win.
successful the first time. So let's see if we can keep that streak going. And guest host today, joining us live from his studio, is Casmo from Casmo TV, the Low Level Hell podcast. We've got his fancy logo, which I will show you at this moment.
Yeah.
It's also at the bottom of the overlay. How's it going, Casmo? It's been a while, man. We haven't seen you since we ruined Firebirds.
I know. Yeah, it's been going good. You know, I'm flying your favorite aircraft in the world, the mighty 737. All that legroom.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. You're doing the conductor drill every time you start.
Yeah, that's right. Which one?
Yeah.
Just flip them all. Just do it all.
Yeah, just flip the switch. We've got a busy show today. We're going to talk about things Casmo knows about, some things Gonky knows about, a few things I maybe know about, but probably not. But we're going to use Casmo's expertise to the max extent possible today. So Douglas is also with us, Mr. Producer. He is AFK. Hopefully he'll be back in a timely manner. So, he's back.
Yep. I'm here when you need me.
All right. So our first topic today is the U.S. sends F-35s, F-16s to the Gulf region. Gonky, take it away.
Yes, Doug. I think. Do you have the article? Just do a quick.
Here we go.
You can just do a quick.
Just read it real quick.
That's off the rails already.
I
Doug's
see it.
muted, so that's going to make it more difficult.
Oh,
for
you
him to
actually
read.
want me to read it?
Yeah.
This is from The Hill.
Quick
It's
summary.
headline is U.S. is going to send F-35s, F-16s to the Gulf. Apparently, Iran has been attempting to seize oil tankers. It successfully seized a couple, or at least one. And they're going to send F-16s, F-35s, and a destroyer to supplement the F-16s and A-10s that are already there. And apparently, we're discouraging Iran from continuing this activity.
Didn't we play this game already before?
I was gonna say. So I grew up in this region, in Saudi Arabia, Persian Gulf, and it's always been from the 70s. I'm that old, but it's always been kind of a region of conflict, and kind of like Casmo is saying, we think we've heard this before. So you could get pretty political and whatnot with this article. I have a little bit of experience as far as like militarily what happens. So back in 2007, they actually took I think it's 15 British sailors as hostages. So the Iranians came out. There was a dispute on, hey, these are our waters. No, they're not. The Brits lost, so they took them captive, and as a response, as part of the U.S. response, they sent 2 carriers into the Gulf, and I was part of that. As John C. Stennis, I think he said Nimitz was the other one, but and of course, we're flying cap, and tensions were high. But as somebody who was there, and the fact they actually took hostages, the media will always hype it up because they want you to watch. But like taking off, it was weapons. What was it, white and tight, which is basically no chance to arm up unless you're being attacked, or you or a coalition aircraft, or whatever is being attacked. And so I just remember being up there flying cap and an F-18, just right up against the border of Iran. Hot and cold. And they had their F4s. I could see them on radar. I couldn't see them visually. But I just remember thinking, I've got a winder and the gun. I know he's probably got like a Sparrow. I'm like, I'm going to be casualty 1 via Sparrow off an F4, and I'm not going to be happy about it. So that's actually what I was thinking the whole time, because that was a loadout that they sent us up for. So I'm not going to speculate on like what the weapons posture is, but I think it's nothing more than a show of force, which Casmo knows. We do shows of force in various sizes and capacities. There could be some troops on the ground that need something loud and fast to go over, and they'll call an A-10's not fast, but an F-16 or an F-18 zoom by and scare some people. And reading this article and having listened to the media talk about it, I think all it is basically just that, just a show of force, nothing more, nothing less.
Yeah.
And I think actually Iran's probably playing the same game. I will say that some of the best intercepts that I ever did was during that whole conflict, because they would every day send a maritime patrol airplane out to the carrier, straight for it, and of course we would intercept it, and it was pretty fun because we had the faster airplane. But other than that, it was all show.
Did they have the Exocet anti-ship missile?
I'm sure they did. I'm sure.
Yeah,
Casmo, do you have any experience dealing with the Iranians as far as show of force as an Army guy?
No, I mean, my joke really is to the late 80s and stuff. And when I was flying OH-58s in the Army, and that was kind of the birth of the armed OH-58 Delta, was out there flying off of these converted oil rigs,
right?
And trying to intercept these Iranian gunboats that were going to interdict these ships. So I think around 2020, like right before COVID, when things started heating up and we had the Al-Assad missile strike from Iran and all that stuff was going on, I think they were doing that again. There was Apaches that were flying off of Navy ships, and I think I think the Navy's got some sort of like movable platform thing they can just plop in the water and it becomes like a helicopter base. So they were flying off of stuff like that too. So yeah, it's nothing, it's all nothing new. I think you're right though with the jets. It's easy to move them somewhere, right? I mean, most of them just self-deploy, so it's an easy button to just throw stuff over there because the carrier is going to take forever, and Army stuff's going to take forever. So yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, and it's if you read about, it's always about a border dispute, right? Hey, we're in international waters. No, you're not. And the crazy thing was, like, the Navy recognized Farsi Island as like a no-fly zone, but the Air Force didn't. So I got in trouble once because I got really close to flying over Farsi Island, and the whole time I'm like, well, like we can't even agree on on the airspace or sea space out here. This is kind of ridiculous, but I don't know. It's kind of a mess over there, and it's sad because at the end of the day, there's a bunch of innocent people out there just trying to make a living that suffer.
Yeah.
Theater security,
a tight area, so I can see the border just always being an issue because that whole area is just so tight and crammed in, and there's just so many competing, things.
Oh yeah. All the sea space, it was with 2 carrier ops in there. It was basically a deconfliction drill.
Yeah. Well.
But yeah, Mover, any experience over there in with the Iranian situation?
Well, in Iraq, we were always on the border, and they were always pinging us with whatever surface-to-air missile threats that they had in the region.
Oh, yeah.
And we also had guys fly into some airspaces that they weren't supposed to and end up getting grounded, because that's a common thing where you get turned around in the cast wheel and end up where you're not supposed to be. But in general, it's always going to be, a contested area, especially as you start talking about their nuke program and all the different geopolitical aspirations that they have. I will say, though, you and I were talking about this a little bit. The government is what it is, but the people are a lot different, and the people are good people. It's not the government, or it's not the people, it's the government. And, they want freedom, and they want to break away in some cases away from what this is. But unfortunately, it just hasn't happened yet.
Well, it's funny you say that. The captain I just flew with the other day, he's Iranian. And so, we took off and we were talking, and he was like, oh, what's your background? I told him I was in the Army, and I was like, well, where are you from? Because I could tell he's not a local.
You ain't from around here, are you?
Yeah. Where are you from? And I'm from Iran, and same thing. But I mean, that was the thing. He's like, hey, the Iranian people, like, we love you dudes. It's the government. And he had some very choice words and some things to talk about the government. But you're 100% right. I mean, and that's generally true across the board, right? It's always just these governments just fighting over stuff, and It's rough.
Yeah, Casmo, did you ever run an intercept in the helicopter against PT boats and stuff?
No,
Probably
no,
no.
no, that wasn't really in
that'd be
our,
awesome.
our stuff. We run intercepts on dudes, walking. I think the most high adventure of that we had was I was in Iraq in 2006, and this was like drones were still kind of early on and stuff. You had them, but it wasn't nearly the way it is now. And people kept talking about seeing something out there, and so sure enough, it turned out that it looked like it was an Iranian drone that was being sent over and looking at stuff. And so we were given the clearance to like, hey, if you ever come across this thing, you're clear to engage. So a bunch of helicopter guys were like, oh, how are we going to do this? So the conversation was always, we were talking about with flechette rockets, they burst open like, yeah, that's probably the best bet. Just shoot a flechette at it. Just ridiculous. So unfortunately, never got to do it.
Dude, that's the closest I ever got to an air-to-air kill was a Iranian drone. We were sitting because we had alert postures, right? You had the air-to-air alert and the air-to-ground alert, and I was in air-to-air alert, and they were like, hey, klaxon's going off, we're going, and they canceled us right as we were taxiing out because they gave it to some dudes that were already airborne, and they strafed the thing and they got the kill. And I'm like, come on, really?
Probably some
It's
helo
my
guys,
only
man.
job. It's my
Probably
only
some-
job. No, it's Viper dudes. They
Was
strafed
it?
it. Like they didn't like it, they were like, oh, I'm gonna deal with this.
So does that
roll in,
count?
High angle strafe.
Does that count as a kill? Like if you get 5 drones, are you an ace? Like how does that work?
Does a balloon count? I don't know. I mean, does a children's Mylar balloon count less than a Chinese spy balloon? I don't know. I mean,
Apparently,
if
they're
so,
just as
I've
hard
got
to
at
kill.
least one. Well, I've got a flare kill. Gonky, you videoed
Oh
it.
yeah,
You
I
were
got a
there
flare
when I
kill.
got my
I
flare
was
kill.
there,
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah. So
That's
I
right.
mean, I've shot an air-to-air missile at things in the air.
Ooh,
Yeah.
that counts.
I wasn't angry. I mean, I was a little angry because of just being
Casmo,
there.
I'd
But
totally count it. Why not?
yeah,
Sure.
oh yeah,
Yeah, it's in the
yeah.
air. It's bad.
It was turning.
All right.
Good
segue.
It was under its own power. Like the balloon, you can't miss.
Someone was there. Someone was there. If they were in a bunker, or if they were in the thing.
Well, can you imagine the
because then
terror? Like you're just pucking along with your mouse, and then suddenly, your screen explodes.
That's a Dos Gringos song. You say, "Oh, what the hell," and go get another cup of coffee. Yeah. It's just like DCS, dude. You're just like, oh, son of
Same thing.
a.
Let me
New jet, new day.
That's right.
Yeah. Moving on. Thank you for that. We're going to talk about, and I did it in this order because I went from least to most. So,
Oh no, the Navy seems pretty rough.
well, it's a new Navy now. You can do whatever you want. Not that there's anything
Over.
wrong with.
Easy. Yellow light.
Sorry.
We still do. We're doing
Stuck
lights.
up.
Yellow light.
You're stuck
he's
on
spotting
a
your joke.
boat in the middle of
Steady.
nowhere with 5,000 other. All right. So wanted to talk a little bit about deployed life. But let's flip the script because Casmo's our guest. Tell us what it's like to deploy for Uncle Sam in the United States of America's Army.
It's tremendous. It's really long. I think you guys
That's what
cram
she
like
said.
3 deployments into one of ours. Ours are. It depends, right? Because it depends on what you're doing. If you're an infantry guy, you're probably hating life because you're stuck out at like the smallest places, or you could be, and you're eating MREs every day, and you're cut off and stuff. For aviation, it's really not that horrible. Typically you're at an air base or something like that, and it's fairly built up. You got pretty decent food. My Afghanistan tour 09 to 10 was probably the quote unquote worst, even though I had the most fun on that one. We started in Kandahar, which is very built up. There's a lot going on there, but the food was not great. And then I got pushed out to a little base that had a dirt runway, which was cool to watch C-17s come in all the time and land on this little dirt runway. But it was basically just our helicopters. And when we started, we were crammed in, those little, we call them chews. I don't know if you guys had a different name, but like the little trailer type things, little containers, we had like 4 guys per chew while they were still getting everything expanded. We had no running water. We had no plumbing. So, you were taking a shower, you'd grab a couple water bottles and, go to the shower and just rinse yourself off. But once they got it sort of developed, then you'd probably have like 1 to 2 people per chew. You know, I was a boss, so I got my own chew. Yeah, I mean, the problem I think with the Army stuff is it's just so long. Our deployments are, you know, 12 months generally. You know, I've had some short ones. But it's such an effort to move all of our stuff, and I think that's why it takes so long.
What is a short one? Define short.
I did a 5-month. I know that's like a long one still, but I did a 5-month.
Okay, just for okay, Gonky.
Yeah.
Gonky.
Yeah. Well, Casmo, you're not selling me on it, man.
No, me either.
No, you know, I made a little video about boat life as an aviator, but it's basically camping with, you know, 5,000 of your closest friends. And, you know, there's some similarities in the fact that, you know, you pack all your toys and you go away for a while, so you can stay really focused on what you're doing because there's no distractions, which is cool. And if you get along with your squadron mates, it's actually, like Casmo said, it could be a really good time, even though it's a ton of work, which is the experience that I was lucky enough to have. But, you know, it's all perspective too, because our rooms or whatever that we stay, they're called state rooms. They try to make them sound really nice, but it's pretty tight. So, you know, there'll be two to, I believe, 6 or 8 man. I think the 8 man, we call it the jungle. That's where usually the PlayStation setup was. These were Navy problems. But you know, it's all perspective. I remember being kind of irritated with crews as, you know, took off in the fog, crappy weather, flew 500 miles in the goo. The weather was crap. And I had my poopy pants pulled over my head. We check in with these Army guys on the ground. And, you know, I forget my call sign, Diamond 4, whatever it was. I forget over there. But they're like, hey, hold on just 1 second. And I'm like, oh, yeah, it's going to be go time. And he's like, sorry, man, wind's blowing pretty hard down here. I'd help the guys grab my tent. It was blowing away. And I was like, yeah, I was adjusting the air conditioning in the Hornet. And I was having my chicken dinners here. I was like, all right, it's not that bad.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Perspective. That's right.
Perspective.
Well,
that's right. So,
I mean, I imagine you guys, all of you probably have the same challenges, though, in the sense that because particularly aviation, there's always somebody flying, which means there's always somebody sleeping. And so, like, our rooms, when you had, like, I remember in Kandahar, we did stay in these bigger rooms where they had like 4 or 5 people staying in there, but it was perpetually dark. The lights never came on. You know, we joke about like stalactites and stuff would be growing in there because it was just like humid and gross. And, you know, no one ever went in there to clean because everyone's always on some sort of sleep cycle. So I'm assuming you guys kind of had somewhat of the same issues.
A little bit. We had usually in combat ops, we had 3 launches a day. The first one was a day launch, day recovery. The second one was day launch, night recovery, and the third one was night and night. And that would put it at about it was about maybe an 18-hour day, depending on how the night recoveries went. But what really, and the reason for that, Casmo, is general maintenance on the ship. You can't just keep firing the cats and the resting gear all night. So they would take that time to do repairs of the ship and kind of get it. The boat crew would. If you will. And that was a struggle because, you know, if you were several times I was the last jet to come aboard the carrier, and it was like 2-3 in the morning. By the time I got to bed, it was, you know, 3:30, 4, or even 4 o'clock. And they start test firing the cats at 5 in the morning. And there's no place. It's a steam powered catapult and the ship's 1,000 feet long. You cannot get away from it. So, you know, fatigue does set in complacency as well, you know, because you're in your own little, it's like a hamster tube, you know, your whole life's in this little a couple corridors. But there was a little bit of break at night, mainly so the ship guys could get the ship, you know, good to go for the next day of combat ops. But it was, I can't remember, I think we would 7 days a week, maybe. I mean, sometimes we would take a day off, but it really wasn't a day off. We just didn't fly.
Right.
But yeah. The tempo is pretty amazing.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So the Air Force side.
It's going to be good.
So I think it depends, right? It's the standard fighter pilot answer, standard aviation answer. If you go talk to T-Bear, which Gonky and I are friends with, A-10 guy, he stood up Bagram. And Bagram in the early days of that war was, they were living in tents. They were building stuff. It was the Wild West, a lot of different stuff.
Yeah.
If you compare that to Balad in 2009, where, because typically we take over bases. We either fly out of other countries or we take over bases. And either way, we try to make them as nice as possible. And Balad is a joint base. So the Army was there too. Now, granted, we weren't the same, commingled, but, typically, Guard Reserve is different than active duty. As far as lengths go, Guard Reserve likes to spread the wealth, if you will. So they'll take 120-day deployment and break it up into thirds, or something manageable for the reserve life. Rainbow is what they call it, where they'll take 2 squadrons and they'll go first third, middle third, final third, and then some guys will do 60 days or whatever, or even the full time. But as far as the daily life goes, I mean, when we first showed up, we were living in tents. They put you in the temporary area. They put you in the tents, and Iraq in January is very, very cold. And, you show up and you're living and sleeping in cots and stuff. And you're like, God, this sucks. And then they're like, okay, the other guys have moved out. Now you're moving into your Connex containers. And they're no kidding Connex containers that have 2 bunk beds, 2 sets of bunk beds. And typically your roommate, so, it's 2 officers per, and your roommate's on a different schedule than you are. So really you're by yourself. And, one of the things, I think on the last episode, somebody talked about Gatorade bottles. That is a thing. You're not supposed to do it. Nobody talks about it. But to go pee in the middle of the night, you have to get up, put your shower shoes on or whatever, and then go find the Cadillac. And usually there's some indigenous personnel, Steve, that is hanging out in there and eyeing you the whole time you're doing this. And this is where, you take a shower, you do all your bathroom activities and stuff. And that's all one side. And where I say, make fun of the Air Force, I mean, we had a Burger King. Now, granted, it wasn't a real Burger King. It had like 2 items on the menu. There was a Subway and there was a coffee bean, the green bean, where the dudes would get their coffee. Yeah. Internet cafe. So all that stuff was on one side, and then we would take trucks, little pickup trucks, and drive them over to actually where the deployed facilities where the jets were. And, you talk about what wakes you up. Yeah, you got jets going all the time. That part sucks because it's 24-hour operations. But for us, mortar attacks. I mean, dude, they love to lob mortars over the fence at us. And, you'd either have it like the closest one I had was like, 50 yards from where I was, and I'm like, dude, I'm just gonna die. I'm too tired. I don't care if this is it. This, whatever. I'm not getting on the ground anymore. I'm done. And you'd be at the gym, right? Which, by the way, they have a really nice gym with treadmills and machines, and it's not a prison gym. It's like no kidding Planet Fitness. I mean, it's a nice or LA Fitness. I guess Planet Fitness would be weird, but so you have all the amenities. Now, back in 2009, it's probably changed. You had an internet cafe that had phones and internet, and that was the only way you could reach back home because we didn't have Wi-Fi. From what I understand, as they got farther into this, they got satellite internet, and people could have internet, or pay for it or whatever, wherever they were.
My last deployment, I had AT&T, I think, in Iraq, and I was texting home. I mean,
yeah. I mean, things change a lot with technology, so a little different in 2009 versus later. But as far as the daily life, you're always flying. I mean, you're either flying or doing squadron duties like Gonky talked about. If you're not flying, typically dudes would hang out there. We had a little movie room. We'd watch movies, especially sitting alert. When you're sitting alert, you got your G suit on, you're just hanging out, and you're watching. I think we watched Hellboy 1,000 times. We watched the whole season of various shows because Team America was like one of the favorites we watched so many times, which was huge irony. But you're either doing that. There's no real mission planning because it's all done for you, because all we were doing was close air support and theater airborne reconnaissance. So really, you show up, here's your mission pack. They give you this thing because the mission planning cell does it. Now you could be assigned to the mission planning cell the day prior and be doing it, but typically somebody was doing that for you, and you'd brief, and you go fly. I remember because my first flights out of non-graded were combat sorties, and what really hit me, I remember the guy's call sign was Opie, Great American. My first combat sortie, he briefs like he's going through contingencies and stuff, and a lot of times you just pay lip service. But what hit me the most was, dude, if I jump out, or actually, I think he was, if you jump out, whoever was going to eject, he was like, we're going to set up a perimeter. Anybody that comes around you, strafe them until you're out of bullets, till you bingo out, till you can hand it off to the next guy, and that's where it like snapped. That, like, hey, because you're getting intel briefs of all the bad mamma jammas that are in the country that want to, because this was back with the, what was it? Was it Berkdal? Who was the Zarqawi that slit the guy's throat?
Yeah,
that was.
It was.
We're like, that's fresh in everybody's mind, because if you got caught, so I'm giving myself back problems because I've got my M9 and like 8 magazines, because I'm like, nope, I'm not.
Oh yeah.
Meanwhile, you're in an F-16 and you're just like, my back hurts. This sucks. Why am I carrying so much weight? But so you would go fly these missions, and they could be like we talked about before, 4 to 6 hours, and then you would go back and hey, I'm going to hit the gym, and then I've got to go to bed, because I'm trying to get my body clock aligned with, this country versus back home, and you're trying to call home and they're not awake, and it's this this big thing. But in general, I mean, at the time I was like, man, this kind of sucks. But looking back, I'm like, I'd do that again. It's one of those things where you look back and you're like, yeah, that wasn't. I mean, war sucks, but the camaraderie and the flying with a purpose and having a mission and being around, like-minded individuals that are all highly intelligent and all aiming towards the same goal, you're like, you know what? That was the peak. And
I did that, you got like comfortable. You got comfortable with the routine, and so there's something to be said for that. Like, you didn't have to worry about what to wear. You didn't have to worry about what to eat. Like, you just, all that stuff was planned out for you. You just showed up and did the stuff that you joined the military to do. Because we were flying every day. You're flying your just butt off. But yeah, it sounds incredibly similar to our experiences. Just show up. We would show up for we called QRF, and run the aircraft up, probably make sure everything's working, and then either go take off and go fly and just do what we called flying QRF. And that was just fly around. Like, no one tell us where to go. It was like, we know the neighborhood. Awesome. It's like a beat cop, we're just driving around waiting for trouble. Or if we knew something was going on later, we'd go inside, watch TV, and wait for the call. And sometimes you'd get called and you'd run out. The aircraft, you've already gone through a lot of this checks, so you just jump in, get it cranked up, and go. But your brief, that's incredibly familiar. Yeah, we had the same brief a lot of times. Was, hey, if we go down, nobody's getting within 100 meters or whatever of you. And and of course we had the benefit of it happened too, where guys would get shot down and the other guy would land, and the dudes would jump on the skids or jump on the wheels or whatever the aircraft was, and haul them out of there. Obviously, it's a little bit easier for us, but
dude,
very similar.
So you mentioned that, but when we employed ordnance, there was an 06 that would come look over our shoulder and look at our tapes. Like, it was that high level.
Oh, yeah.
By the time we were, because it had we just had the regime change in the United States, and the ROE had just changed. And so anytime you went kinetic, it was 06 over your shoulder. It was getting briefed. It was, sometimes they were just bombing dirt. It really wasn't a whole lot to it. But you talk about the QRF and running up the jets. Dude, I got lost at Balad. Like, straight up, because when we first get there, there's another squadron there. They're sitting alert. It's a transition. And when it was time for us to do it, they're like, okay, the lieutenant and, whatever, you guys are going to reposition the jets. It is the middle of the night. And Balad, they don't turn the lights on. There's no taxi lights, nothing.
Right.
You're trying to NVG.
That's how you find Balad. You look for the dark patch in the,
Dude,
in the ground.
I am terrible on the ground. I do not do well with ground navigation, and I passed up the sharp left turn to go to the shelter where we were, pre-positioning the aircraft for the alert hangar, and they had to come send the truck out to come get me because I was
Follow me,
taxiing down. I was gone, and they're like, "Where are you going?" I was like, "I don't know. Help! I'm so lost." And yeah, it was something that you remember, and you look back, and you're like, "Yeah, that was good flying." Gonky, you look like you want to say something.
Remember, did you guys have an Army rep as part of your intel briefs?
The glow.
No.
We had an Army guy come aboard the ship, and he was there the whole time, and he would be part of the intel brief in the morning briefing about the ground movements, because sailors, we don't know anything about that, but he would he was at every brief.
That's the glow, and the Air Force generally would send the guy to the Army. He's called the halo.
Yeah.
But yeah, the glow. They were, I think, field artillery guys. Which I always thought was weird. I thought they should be.
Yeah,
aviator.
we did have something like that, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
I don't remember an Army guy ever. It was always the intel guy said, "This is what he told us." It was always third.
Yeah.
He's
This
probably
guy,
like at a higher echelon for you guys.
But we did have Casmo. You talk about QRF airborne. So we would come back because we're doing a lot of reconnaissance. We're doing a lot of sorties where we just don't do anything, and we're just supporting, high speed, low drag guys, but we don't drop anything. And we would come back, and the base would be getting mortared, and then we would come back and become the QRF for the base. So you're coming back, and they're like, "Hey, whatever, you got to hold the high pattern, save your gas," and then all of a sudden, it's like, "Hey, can you put your pod here because the QRF's going outside the wire, and can you support them for doing it?" It was just a pickup game. They didn't have a JTAC. Usually they did. They had somebody that could qualify to do it, but it's just, you see the other side of things. And one of the things while we were deploying that was also different was you practice CAS in a very structured way, and then you get there and it's very different. You've got British JTACs, you've got SEALs that are in convoys. You're supporting guys, and they won't tell you what they're doing, and you're not supposed to know. You're just like, "Hey, all the F-16 is supposed to do is if you see somebody plant an IED down the road, stop the convoy, and we'll deal with it." Or you see them kicking in the door, you see somebody, out running away, let us know. But otherwise, they're doing this high speed stuff, and we're just kind of like, "Yeah, we're watching it on the FLIR," and there's, not much interaction with the actual people kicking in doors.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did a lot of that.
Gonky, you missed out. You missed out with the mortar strikes, man.
Yeah.
Night Traps made up for it, Casmo. We're good.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Coming in at night, I got it.
Night Traps made up for it.
Well, so I will say too, I think we talked about this before. I haven't said this story yet about getting shot. People thought, because Casmo obviously has told his story of getting shot. I landed one time, and the crew chief, like, as soon as I said, "Sir, oh my God, sir, you've been shot," and I'm like, "Oh crap! Wow, okay, awesome." I'm a lieutenant. This is awesome, because we had specific patterns, to avoid getting shot, because obviously that's a threat, and people like to, small arms pop off rounds at F-16s flying by, and he's like, "Sir, look, hydraulic fluid," because jets leak hydraulic fluid sometimes, and there was hydraulic fluid, and there was a hole, so it all kind of made sense. Well, the expediter, crusty senior master sergeant, walks up to it, and this crew chief's all excited. He's like, "Sir, look at that! Look, you got shot. It's awesome. It's not awesome because we got to work on this, but it's awesome. It's combat." He sticks his finger in the hole, so to speak, and he's got the hydraulic fluid on. He's like, "Yeah, that's a threaded hole." He's like, that's a mount that's been there the entire time you've had this jet. We could mount something to it, but it's not a bullet hole, so you're fine." I'm like, "Son of a bitch, I didn't get shot."
Awesome.
Damn it. Yeah. So anyway, then I found $5. All right, moving on. While we have Casmo, before we lose him with boring from our podcast, because, by the way, if you haven't checked out the Low Level Hell podcast, Casmo, it's an awesome job. I know you just had, or was that an old episode you re-upload? I saw your upload recently.
Yeah, I'm kind of re-uploading some old ones. I've taken kind of a hiatus from it, but I'm probably going to crank it back up here soon. Yeah. Okay.
Doug, before we move on to the next topic, do we have any chats from the kids at home?
We've got a few.
Yeah, let's.
There's
let's knock
a
some of
general
those out.
thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Wow, thanks, Eric.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, thank you, Eric.
How do we get you guys out to EAA Oshkosh Air Venture? I'd like to know
A
that.
pair of MiG-29s, one for me and one for Gonky, and we will fly. And Casmo can have an OH-58, and we'll all just
get. Do they have 2-seaters? I'll ride in the back. That's fine.
Yeah, get some from the back seat. We can all four go.
okay.
I'll read
All
the
right,
coach
yeah.
starts for you.
Yeah, I've never gone because I don't have anything cool to fly there, right? I
Right.
mean, you could just get a hotel room, but
I drove an RV
show
out
up and-
there. It's not the same.
There you go. Yeah.
yeah, show up to an air show with a car. I mean,
Yeah. What is this?
yeah.
I'm going to
which
assume this is one each. Which
World War II fighter is your favorite? P-51, P-38, or F-4U? P-51. Gonky?
And I'm
You
gonna
almost
have
have
to.
to say F-4.
I do. I'm gonna say the Corsair.
It's not like that's a bad choice to have to make.
Yeah.
I'll take the P-38.
All right. Fight's on.
There you
See you at the
go.
merch.
Thank you, Hoover and
the-
Gonky, for your task saturation video. I shared it at a staff meeting, and it was just the message they needed. They loved it.
Wow. Awesome.
What kind of staff? Is it White House staff? Or like how
Yellow
high
lights.
level?
Oh, like a Burger King.
How- what staff? I'm curious now. Who is? Thank you. I appreciate it. No, thank you. We're going to talk about some stuff in the mental health minute later. So
Gonna have
Yes.
to get a
So
Marty
At
to
any
check
point,
in
any
later.
staff is good.
that's
right.
true. It's not the peons. It's the big boss.
And another slightly more detailed thank you, guys. Just a heartfelt thank you from a lifelong aviation enthusiast. I appreciate the stories, perspective, and education. Keep up the great work and stellar content.
Thanks, David.
Thank Gonky. This was his idea.
That's
Awesome.
it for now, gentlemen.
Thank you. So Casmo, this is a topic that people bring up a lot. Flying helicopters versus fixed wing. What's the difference? You know, because you and I are the exact opposite. I flew fixed wing for a really long time, and then I was like, you know what? Let me try this hovering thing. And you hovered for a really long time, and then decided I'm going to be a airline pilot.
Yeah.
And then
Hey, it's so much
Gonky
better.
only hovers when he's ballistic.
I've flown a helicopter once. Twice.
We're gonna make that
sorry,
twice soon. We're gonna make, well, we're gonna make that 3 times.
All
We're
right.
gonna make it 3 times as soon as we can get in
It was
August,
cool.
right? August is
It was really cool. I enjoyed it.
yeah. Casmo, what's your thoughts on this?
I would be interested, like, it's impossible to do, but like compare like your experience transitioning over to mine and see like which one was tougher. Cause I feel like in my head, like it's probably harder to go from jets to helicopters than vice versa. But obviously I don't know. Cause the fundamentally helicopters, I mean, once you get it going, it flies like an airplane for the most part. You know, you turn left, you want to turn left, but it's the hovering part that's weird. So I guess I'm curious, like, how was that transition for you? Did you struggle with it at all?
I did a whole vlog series with Lester, who's an awesome instructor, which, by the way, Lester has, for those of you who don't know, Lester was my instructor. He always wore this big Spaceballs sheriff helmet when I didn't. So it was a big, huge contrast. But Lester will be at Oshkosh this year. He said to go find him and say hi and make sure you say 3Gs top of T, no WCs, which that was his thing, his little mantra for checking your 3 green and the the rotor RPM, engine RPM, all that stuff. But to answer your question, to me, it felt a lot like fingertip. It felt like that level of precision that is required when you're in the weather, flying fingertip, doing maneuvering, stuff like that. It's just these small corrections that you just have to stay on top of. And people talk about the hover button. As soon as you get it, man, it's just, it becomes a thing. I do credit DCS to some degree for helping me because before I took lessons, I know, I did do some Huey flying with JT from Black Rifle Coffee. We did a video, and I think that helped initially, but also, I went out with the Harrison County folks, and the first thing I ever tried to hover was a OH-58A. And, they were like, hey, hands off, he's hovering. And I was like, because I guess intuitively, once you figure it out, it's pretty straightforward, right? Up, down, you just have to be on the pedals from a T6 pilot. That was kind of natural, the P factor of the torque and stuff, because you're always doing that. So it's just a lot of fine inputs. What always, and still to this day, if I'm rusty, spot landings with an auto rotation can still get to me. Just timing that out, mostly because of the Robinson, the low inertia. It's tough to figure that out, but I love it. I absolutely, if people ask me, what do you like better? And to me, it's, if I'm going to do a mission, it's a fighter. If I'm going to fly across the country, give me a fatty, give me a heavy. But if I'm just flying around for fun, give me a helicopter all day long, every day. That is flying. That is backcountry, having a good time. So, I mean, does that jive with what you experienced? I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, it's funny you said something that I didn't really think about, coming from the type of jets that you flew, where, obviously I've never flown one of them, but my understanding is there's very little movement in the controls. Like, it's very precise type movement, versus a 7.3 where you're over here, doing this and it's barely moving, but you're yanking it around. So to transition from flying something, like if you're just like a Cessna dude, and then you go fly helicopters, it's a completely different level of control. And I think that's where people kind of trip up with it, because it is such fine movement. You're barely moving the cyclic for the most part. And so it is kind of like what you're saying, trying to fly, close formation, or I'm sure tanking is probably kind of the same way. So coming from that background helps, but understanding the aerodynamics, again, in flight, probably the weirdest part of the helicopter is just because the aerodynamics, at least sort of conceptually, changes, right? Because you're hovering and things, you go cyclic to the left, the aircraft's going to do something completely different than it does when you're in forward flight. And so making that transition, and I always found it, even with the years and years that I flew, the opposite transition, going from forward flight to a hover, that's where sometimes it could get you. Is trying to make your brain change. Yeah, and you got to be careful.
Bad stuff can happen. Yeah.
And that carries over to the jet. I mean, that's the hardest part. I think most helicopter guys that I've talked to that have gone to airlines, that's what we struggle with, is slowing the jet down, because we're just not used to. I'm used to just yanking back in the nose, and we're just going to slow down, and you can't do that with the jet. And I've catch myself sometimes pulling back, and I'm like, no, don't do that. So that's probably the weirdest part for me. But I agree with you. Like, I miss flying helicopters. I love it because it is so much fun. Flying the big jet is, it pays the bills, but flying helicopters is a lot of fun. So Gonky, you got to get some more.
Casmo,
did you ever do both? Sorry, Gonky. Did you ever simultaneously go from one to the other?
What do you mean?
Like, when I was learning how to fly, when I was learning to fly the helicopter, I had planned to do it all in one time, and then COVID, because I was doing this during COVID, and COVID happened, I got a delay, so I actually ended up flying simultaneously. Like, I would fly the T-38 one day, for my reserve duties, and then the next day I'd go fly the helicopter, still learning how to fly the helicopter, and then back. No. Did you ever do both? Because there was only one time, and it was in the T-38, because they say the most dangerous pilots in the world for this are fixed wing going to helicopters, because there's so many bad habits that just don't apply to helicopters. And it actually was the opposite for me, because there was only one time where, I went the wrong way on the throttle, because I was taking off, and I actually was putting a boot of left pedal, in as I'm taking off, or going the wrong way with the thing. That only happened, one each. But I'm curious, that's why I was asking, because people think it's a big deal, but once you've done it like twice, you're like, because your brain just goes, I'm in this, I need to do this, and it's automatic. Sorry,
no, I had a good break between flying helicopters and fixed wing, probably a good year between the two.
So Casmo, I've never flown a helicopter, but I had about 800 hours of just single engine piston time as like a CFI and stuff. So I'm curious, when you started flying jets, did the increased envelope affect you? Meaning, like, probably in a helicopter, you didn't go higher than 1,000 feet, right? Probably didn't go faster than 150 knots, maybe. Like, did you have a hard time, like, figuring, like, is that, I know I did, like, when I remember flying the T-37 and T-45, and I still had 100 knot brain going on, and and I was just
that's
curious,
a real thing.
Was that hard?
Yeah, 100%. And it's funny, I can walk that all the way back to when I first joined the Army. You're all trained to be like infantry guys, and you're thinking like that 2 miles an hour. And then I was a tank guy, and so we'd be moving 20,
wow.
30 miles an hour. And that transition of like I remember the first time doing mounted land nav, and my ability to keep track of myself on the map was completely screwed up because I was still thinking so slow. So what you're saying, 100%. I mean, I constantly like quiz myself, like in flight, I'll look at the ground speed and I'll just start working out the math. Like, okay, how fast am I moving per minute? And trying to figure out, okay, if I needed to descend, because I don't want to be caught with my pants down when they sit and like, oh, do I go vertical speed? All this stuff. But yeah, 100%, you're the brain transition. And I've only been flying jets now for just a little over a year. And I still feel like I'm, way back there. I could do the basics, but when ATC throws something crazy at me, I'm looking at the captain like, what button? So,
I know the
I
feeling.
think that's a true statement. Yeah.
You're flying a Steam 737 though, so that's probably valid for anybody. Yeah, that's
Bless you.
LNAV, VNAV path. What now? What's it doing?
Yeah, it's like I jump in. I'm like, oh, good, the Memphis Bell again. Yeah, we've got some with deepness and everything, but yeah, when you get into the steam gauge 7.3, and it's usually like we have those on like our VIP flights, and so we're taking like sports teams to like these tiny little podunk town, airports. They're really small and it's dark, and I'm like, man, I can't even. I'm looking at the iPad so I can figure out where I am. Yeah, it's rough. Makes you a better pilot.
Sure.
Yeah, that's what they always say. I do think being a helicopter pilot has made me a better pilot. I think being able to do multiple, having a larger breadth and depth of experience is a good thing. And I appreciate it. I mean, I appreciate my time in helicopters. A lot of people say, oh, it's dangerous or whatever. But I think people misunderstand because, there's a lot of mystery behind how the helicopter actually works. They misunderstand the fact that it's almost the same as just flying a single engine Cessna. You've got the same risk factors. You have to be in practice. You have to do all the different things safety wise. But I would rather put a helicopter into a field than a Cessna, because I think, as far as what happens if I miss, I mean, an auto rotation versus something else, as long as I maintain my energy, it's different. But cool. Well, any other reattacks on that, fellers? No?
Mark's
Okay.
complete.
Moving on. This is along the same lines of how we compare doing close air support in fixed wing aircraft. Casmo versus rotary. Casmo, were you JTAC as well, or did you just do the airborne stuff? Did you ever call in strikes in general?
I mean, yes. I mean, I have in the sense, like not in combat. We would do it training. So I was here at the artist formerly known as Fort Bragg. Now it's Fort Liberty. But it had Pope Air Force Base right next door, and they had A-10s. So it was not uncommon in my early kind of years of flying that we would go out on the range, and the A-10 guys were constantly just, I think they always took off with gun rounds. They would just always shoot, and then they'd go do something else. So it wasn't uncommon to go out and hear them on the range. You'd call range control, get hooked up with JTAC, and then you'd be lazing for them and talking them on and stuff like that. And we used to practice it quite a bit within ourselves. The Army doesn't have JTACs, except in very, like the special operations guys. Those guys will get signed off. And I know of a few pilots who they've kind of done the thing where they send them to get signed off as JTAC. But the problem with being a JTAC is it's just like being a pilot in the sense that there's certain minimums, right? So the JTACs have a certain minimum that they have to hold. How can you do that? Our Air Force JTACs have a hard enough time maintaining, their currency. Everyone that I've ever talked to. So trying to then do that across the Army. So we never had quote unquote JTACs or FAC-As, but I would say that we certainly trained to a standard that push comes to shove, we could absolutely do it. It's not challenging. I mean, especially if you're already a pilot, because a lot of that stuff is just pilot stuff, right? It's just situational awareness. It's getting somebody zoomed in on the right spot. I think that's the hardest part. The hardest part of doing anything, from our perspective, dealing with jets, and then for ground guys dealing with us, is getting you to look at the right spot. Once you figure that out, the rest is just like, every JTAC I ever heard, they're like, they get you zoned in on the target, and they're like, okay, stand by for the 9 line. They just rattle a bunch of crap off just to make it legal. But they've already showed you where the target is. And that's how it generally was for us.
Yeah, especially in the digital age.
I remember like looking at my AT FLIR, right on the target, and then I would look outside, completely tumbleweed myself. I'm like, wait a minute. Yeah. Like, which way is the FLIR looking? then of course you get the helmet. The helmet mounted queuing system is pretty
kids
nice
these days. Kids these days with their fancy
struggle.
helmets.
Dude, we carry binoculars. We carry binoculars.
Yeah.
I tried to use them
Kids
once.
these days.
I did that once.
Yeah.
I'm like, what is it? Yeah, exactly. It's like zing.
Ridiculous.
I'll get it next time. Yeah. That's hard because they want you. I mean, being able to visually see what you're gonna attack or overfly or whatever is a real nice warm and fuzzy to have.
But Casmo, I've seen a lot of your Apache videos, which, guys, check out Casmo's channel because that's a lot of good DCS Apache videos. But you talk about, just watching, I don't know if a lot of that's close air support, but just posturing and positioning. We either talk about keyhole cast where you're different points relative to the target, or you're in the wheel. And as far as low threat close air support, which is the majority of what we've been doing for the last 20 years, you're in the wheel, you're in an orbit around the target because, that's where we need to be. That's the way the JTAC can see us, and that's the way we can see the target. But you guys do a little bit different, right? I mean, you're not orbiting necessarily over the target. It depends. Yeah.
I mean, there's certainly times where we've orbited the target. It just kind of depends on what the target is, right? So if you're, typically if we were doing something with special operations guys and they're hitting a house or they're hitting something very specific, then we would definitely pick up an orbit because that way you can look for squirters, right? Guys that are shooting out the back and stuff like that, or looking for threats coming from outside in. So we would definitely pick up an orbit. But if it was something more like intense, we're probably going to hang out like behind and above the ground force, because that way we're not catching anything. Because again, for you guys, you're flying so high, you can be at those different angles and it's probably not much of a threat. But if I'm on the other side of the target and those dudes are just lighting it up, as they tend to do, there's stuff spraying everywhere. I don't want to be anywhere near that.
Yeah, crossfire. So you guys are actually, that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, it's something to worry about, right? So if I'm on the behind him, I can then also see where a lot of that fire is going, especially at night. I mean, at night, it's easier to find targets because they can shoot infrared beams. They can shoot tracers. It looks like a Pink Floyd concert sometimes. There's just way too much stuff. I'm like, all right, I need you to stop. Just get one laser out. But yeah, being behind, because then too, for us, and I imagine it's probably the same for you, if you're doing something close to the friendlies, coming in from behind them or over the shoulder or a little bit at an angle is just safer, right? And it gives them a warm and fuzzy because sometimes the guys on the ground, they don't really understand the weapon system, right? And so they think that stuff's just gonna fall out and land on them. It's like, bro, I'm still behind you, but I'm pointing past you. Like it's okay that the rockets are shooting now or the missile or whatever. But yeah, so to answer your question, it just kind of depends.
No, we don't. I mean, especially with laser guided bombs and stuff, you don't want to be over the dudes because there's too much of a risk that the lasers, that laser spot, you want to be off axis.
You got your safe
and especially with strafe, I mean, T-Bear, great example. If you're going in over the JTAC's head, that's bad. I mean, that's an interesting consideration, especially being the speeds that we're flying. We don't have the ability to, adjust on the target right now. A-10 can, they can do multiple strafes, but for us, it's like, hey, once we're in, that's it.
Yeah,
we're not. We're one and done. And that's an interesting point you made with these high speed guys. So would they have you? Was it a consideration like, hey, we don't want the thump 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 to ruin our element of surprise because they don't know we're there a lot of times. We're flying so high that.
I remember a raid in particular in Mosul. 2006 timeframe, we were working with the Rangers and they were driving up to hit this target and their plan was to get I don't know, a mile or so from this house in the middle of town. It was at night and they were going to dismount and walk up to the house and raid it. And so they wanted us close on the approach, and then they said, hey, when we get like 3Ks, which I was flying Kiowas, small aircraft, you're not making a lot of noise, a kilometer or two out, they're not going to hear you. Or even if they do, they're so used to you being around, it's like there's helicopters. So what? There's always helicopters. But like at the 3K mark, I think is when they wanted us to break off. So then we kind of just picked up a wide orbit and put the sensors in on the target area. And generally you'd have okay, one guy look at the target, one guy look at the ground force and just kind of keep track and make sure that everything's going well. And then once they walked in fact, it was really cool because we were at the perfect spot where they went up to the door and put charges on it and blew the door in. And that was like our cue, because they're like, it's game on now, right? So then we could just zip in, and then we picked up kind of a tight orbit of, right overhead essentially. But yeah, that's absolutely consideration. And then depending on what you're flying, if you're flying Apache, you're going to want be a little bit further because it's a noisier aircraft, but it's also got better sensors, so you can see a little bit better as well.
Yeah. Gonky?
Yeah, we were watching. I watched 3 or 4 guys playing an IED in Iraq, and we had Laser Maverick we wanted to use on them, but back then the RRE was a little tighter, and they had these Apaches kept trying to come in on them, but they would hear the helicopters coming and they would disperse. And we burned like 3 tanks of gas just watching this evolution of them digging a little, getting scared because the Apaches were cruising up, and we never got any clearance to employ on them because the ROE was pretty tight. Yeah. But yeah, up where we're at, they couldn't hear us. We were basically right over them, just watching them with the FLIR.
Casmo, I'm sure the Apache less so, but the Kiowa, was it a real consideration as far as altitudes and speeds, as far as auto rotation? Like, what happens if we lose an engine here? What's kind of your? Are you just accepting the risk?
I think you just accept the risk. And it's funny you bring that up, because like when I went to fly Apaches, dual engine, and the instructors were always like, "Oh, you need to stay above this airspeed, the safe single engine airspeed." I'm like, bro, I just spent like 10 years flying a single engine aircraft at 50 feet with dudes shooting at me. Like, I'm not really worried about losing an engine. Like, it's just not a consideration. So I think you just kind of assume the risk. And we used to practice doing a low level auto, come in at 50 feet, 90 knots. And, and back when I went through flight school, I don't know if they still do it, or, well, obviously Kai was gone, but I don't know if they kept doing it. But, they roll the throttle off and you just yank it back and just auto it down right to the ground. So it was kind of one of those where, it could happen. And if it does, hopefully your muscle memory is still there and you get through it. But yeah, Kiowa guys like to fly low, mainly because our sensors suck so bad. They were really old. They weren't designed to look at 3 dudes on the side of the road at 3Ks. They're meant to look for Russian horde coming through the Fulda Gap in the early 90s, right? So we kind of had to use the Mark 1 eyeball. In fact, generally we didn't even use the sight during the day. You would be mainly scanning just with your eyeballs and looking for stuff that's out of ordinary, right? I remember looking on the top of a hill that was overlooking a road in Afghanistan. And we were like, hey, look, there's a water bottle there. Like, somebody's been here recently. And so that became like a point that we would check. Wow. Like, that's probably like, who else would be up here? Like, there's no other reason to be up here. Yeah. So this is probably a bad dude. Wow. So it's little things like that you learn to look for as a scout pilot. And you couldn't find that with sensors, even with an Apache with the TADs, you would have just never noticed it. And then with the Apache, the sights were so much better, and so you would fly a little bit higher and use those to see more. And it was harder to see out the side. You could still do it, but it wasn't as easy with the Kiowa. You wouldn't have a door on. You'd just be hanging out the side looking around. So yeah.
Did you ever employ the M4 out the side of the door?
Yeah, absolutely. I did a couple times. I had some guys who did it a lot, and were really good at it. Like, I don't want to tell some of the stories, but they were pretty good at it. But yeah, I remember doing it one time at night, and it was ridiculous because the flash of the muzzle, you couldn't really see what you were aiming at. Like, I knew there was a guy there and I kept shooting and I couldn't see. So finally I had my wingman, like the target's over here. So my wingman and I would be up and above him to the left, and I put the sight on the target, on the guy. And so I could see the rounds hitting. And so I'm just like yelling over the mic to him. I'm like, left, right, up, trying to correct his rounds. And poor guy, he was a bad dude. But he's running between these little trees, probably about as big around as my mic, and just like trying to hide behind him. And then he'd run to the next one and hide and stuff. And, eventually. Stay
away from the cans.
But yeah, essentially that's exactly what it felt like. Wow. And it's morose, and we can sort of laugh about it just because that's the world that we grow up in and stuff. But,
yeah,
that's the reality. But yeah, no, absolutely. Shooting the M4 how can you not? Like, just do it for fun. I mean, we used to go out and shoot, just practice. But coming back from that engagement, what's that?
Did it have a night sun? Did it have like a spotlight you could put on any of these people while you're shooting?
No, you were wearing goggles and just,
Oh, wow.
I mean, guys would have like the red dot sights, you'd put that kind of crap on the rifle, but you didn't really aim. You just kind of like, at least for me, you just kind of felt right. You're like, okay, that's good. And you'd practice enough that you'd get a good concept. I'm sure just like strafing in a jet, like I'm sure you kind of knew like, okay, this feels right. Stuff like
Say
that.
hello to my little friend.
The Aussies liked it when we'd shoot our pistol out. I don't know why, but they laughed if we would ever shoot our pistol out the side, which of course we never did.
Did you shoot
for
your
real.
pistol?
Oh yeah.
Oh.
No, not for like combat, like just for fun, just like shoot the pistol. I don't know why.
There's no
Again, why
bullet
not?
accountability when you come back. Like, hey, you had.
There's only so much. You have an allotment to train with. I was training. It's fine.
Wow. Yeah. Thanks, Doug. For legal reasons, this is a joke.
For legal reasons, this is a joke. Yeah.
Wow. All right. Any reattacks on that, Gonky?
No, sir.
Casmo? That's awesome, dude. We will all forever be humbled in your presence when it comes to this stuff.
Pretty much.
Yeah. All right, Gonky, I believe this one's yours. With the help of Douglas.
Yeah, there's an article in Reuters that the House passed a reauthorization for the FAA, which apparently included a bunch of specifics. And one of the specifics was raising commercial pilot retirement age from 65 to 67.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that
Yeah.
a big deal?
I read a couple articles about this, and that bill was 800 pages. So who knows what else is actually in it, or if anybody will read it. But
You have
that's
to pass
nuts.
it to find out what's in it.
Correct. Mover, yellow light. No, so I don't, I saw that and I just thought, I don't know if you guys have the same thought, but when like 30 years ago, I worked at a grocery store and it was pretty much run by all kids. Now, when I go to the grocery store, there's like old people. And that's just what I think of this, keep raising the age of pilots. It's like, man, at some point, you got to put the out the pasture. The people who support it say, hey, it's going to help with the pilot shortage. Hey, it's going to help with mentorship. But the people who are against it are like, no, it's going to logjam the training pipeline. And I read a thing where at American, something like 30% of like the oldest pilots that are there are on like disability. Like they're not even doing the job.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's my opinion of it is it's probably it's got to go to the House, right? But or the Senate, sorry.
Yeah.
It's gotta go to the
I'm just a
Senate.
bill guy. It shows you how it gets passed.
I'm just a bill.
They're probably speed reading it right
Sitting
now.
on Capitol Hill. No,
Anything important? Nothing yet, sir.
It's all whose hands get greased and then they get money. And oh my God, there's the disclaimer again.
Yeah, I know. I don't know. I mean, we're all old enough to remember it used to be 60, and then they raised it to 65.
Yeah. That crushed a lot of people.
It did, but the older I get, the more I realize just those 2 years is a big deal.
Yeah.
Watching my parents' age, not that they're old and crazy or nothing, but just the older you get, just you lose some of your motor skills. I don't know. It's just time to stop working sometimes. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I think I read something too, like a majority of airline pilots retire before they hit 65 anyway, or they're medically retired before that anyway. So
you work, Casmo. I'm going to come there. They must make good money.
I just don't. I mean, I agree with you. I don't think it's going to be that big of an impact. Like, I don't think the numbers are going to change. I don't think it's going to change anything with the hiring shortage. You could make the argument for the mentoring, but I don't know. But then there's the other side of that coin, which is and I think you kind of touched on it with the training pipeline, because what the ICAO standards are still 65. So if
that's right.
You're Captain Big Man and you're flying, 777 or whatever from Dallas to Tokyo all the time. And now suddenly it's like, hey, now we need you to fly a 7-3 and you're doing Denver to Dallas, all the time. Are you going to stay? I don't think so, unless you got like the third wife and the 8 boats, and whatever. And then I guess you kind of lock yourself in.
Yeah.
But Yeah, and there's going to be plenty of those dudes because I know I've flown with a few of them, but I don't think those numbers are going to be substantial. So I just, at the end of the day, I don't think that it's going to matter that much.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if it does pass. And we've got some older guys where I'm at, but I don't know. Mover.
Standard airline pilot answer is I want it to stay as is until I need it.
Right.
And then we can change. Don't change it now. Wait, and then you can do whatever.
But we waiting for a while.
Well, so the other argument is because they didn't address this, right? So they say this is going to affect the pilot shortage. I agree with Casmo and Gonky. I don't think it's going to have an appreciable difference on whether we are canceling flights because of manning. I do think that from a unionist perspective, it's bad because we've already had a 5-year drop for people that expected, because you join this career with an expectation, right? You're like, I need to plan for this. And then that changes. And then there's this 5 years of stagnation. And now it's going to be 2 years. And in fact, I think that I've seen versions of this bill, and it'll depend on, how they reconcile between the Senate and the House. But I've seen versions that are actually 67 plus 364 days. It's right before your 68th birthday. So that's 3 years. So from a unionist perspective, it's bad because you have planned, the deal was 60. Okay. Then they moved it to 65 and now they're moving it again. It's going to cause stagnation. And that is what is drawing people into this job, is because it's a record, retirements and there's movement. If you stop that, it's going to be 2 years of stagnation unless ICAO doesn't do it. I think ICAO, if the U.S. says 67, ICAO is going to fall in line. They're not going to. So? Yeah, because look at all the countries that already are. I think Japan, there are quite a few countries that are already age 67.
Was ICAO 60 before? And then when we changed it to 65? Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Wow. So it's already, I think what the safety aspect, let's face it, airliners are safe. They're inherently safe. They're procedurally safe. 2 people in the cockpit. As long as you keep 2 people in the cockpit, I don't think it matters for a safety perspective, because we've already seen cases where somebody has a medical emergency, even the first officer or the captain, and it's handled successfully because you've got that other pilot there. Now, if we start talking single pilot or automation, AI, then it's a problem, because now you've lost that redundancy. You've lost that safety aspect.
Instead of just age, I think you guys probably agree with me. It's there can be a major disparity between one 67-year-old and another. Oh, yeah. I've seen some pretty huge. I've seen some pretty out of shape captains walking around that were
you're not fitting through that little window.
No. So it kind of goes back to the FAA medical. Maybe instead of trying to raise the age, they need to.
You would lose so many pilots if you did that. That would be, if you raise the medical standards, you would lose people from all walks of life.
Not raise the medical standard, but hey, beyond this age,
adhere to it.
Yes, these are old people need certain cognitive skills and motor skills and whatnot.
Well, you get that in the sim. We already get that, right? You go to your recurrency training and there's some level of, hey, can he hack? Well, valid.
Yeah, I agree.
Look, if Pete Mitchell could blow up in a Dark Star and eject and still ride his Harley or as Kawasaki at the end of Top Gun Maverick at 60, I think you could give people a little bit of leeway to waddle their into the.
But that's my point exactly. He's 60. I could show you some 60-year-olds that are in a graveyard. that's what I'm saying. Is the disparity at that age are
age discrimination, Gonky.
Is that what that is? Am I yellow light now?
Yeah, I think, Gonky, you need to be a little bit kinder and gentler. I don't like the pulling up the ladder part of this. That's the thing that gets me, is I got mine, I need 2 more years to pay for ex-wife number 6.9, and you junior guys, you'll be senior someday. I don't like that part. I wouldn't have a problem with it if they said, hey, it's still 65, but if you want to keep flying, you can come back to a regional and start over. Domestic only.
They used to go to the FE, right? Isn't that right? Like
back in the day?
Right. Yeah. You could be like 75 and be a flight engineer, right? But then we kind of got rid of that position.
Yeah, I'm gonna get some hate mail for what I just said. I'm sorry. I apologize in advance. All of the get off my lawn.
But I think that's the bigger question or the bigger conversation is not so much the age, but like you said, the single pilot ops, because I keep hearing that over and over. And it's like the first time I flew into Newark and did like the stadium visual arrival, I was like, I can't imagine in a world where doing this single pilot is okay. Like you're just both like just looking at everything, and it's just so chaotic. And I just, that part scares me. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. And even if it does, it's going to start over in a cargo land. But still, yeah, that's the conversation. And the other thing that I just came across the other day, I read an article. It was talking about, and I think maybe you guys can appreciate this too, is quality of life is starting to trump pay in a lot of people in the airlines. And so there was an article for United was saying they were having trouble getting guys to upgrade because the first option was like, why would I do that? Yeah, why would I do that? And I'm the same way in my company. Like I'm already like number 12 on the OML for like my base. And guys are like, oh, when are you gonna upgrade? I'm like, never. Why would I? Like now you're gonna make me change my base. I'm gonna be the lowest dude on the totem pole.
You are totally preaching the choir here, man.
Yeah. And so I'm just curious, like, because it sounds like if United is saying this is a problem, I know other first officers at my company, which is a little rinky-dink company, it's a problem. So yeah, I'm just be interested to see how that plays out over time.
And they used to force guys, right? Move up or move out, right? Didn't it? I know at the regionals.
Yeah, that used to be
regionals
up or out. Yeah, no,
they started forcing upgrades at like
sure.
PSA and stuff like that.
Yeah. But on the flip side, so that is both the gift and the curse. I've seen guys talk about this. You talk about quality of life. Well, the reason quality of life is so bad is because of the pilot shortage, because they're so afraid they can't cover the schedules. So if you alleviate the pilot shortage, you won't move up in seniority, but you'll actually get more quality of life because they'll have more pilots to fill the schedule. But you're not fixing. Gonky, you and I talked about this the other day about the military when I was saying to make them tell you no. And I said, hey, we've got in the military side, which we're about to get to in a minute. In the military side, we're not enough qualified applicants, and we've got a retention problem on the back end. But there's actually a middle piece to that, and that is the training pipeline. You cannot keep the correct amount of people qualified and in the seats. And the same thing applies with the airlines is, okay, so you just fix the top half of the seniority list, which, as Casmo said, that's probably going to be guys that just go off on long-term disability for even longer. But and even if you say, hey, what about the junior guys? Well, they don't want to touch the 1,500-hour thing, which I think is arbitrary. I mean, I think it's very arbitrary, especially in situations like Casmo, where he had to go just fly to get qualified to get the ATP when he had a considerable amount of airmanship to get there. There's a lot of arbitrary rules here, which was based off of Colgan Air, which had nothing to do with how many hours they had. It was about fatigue. It was about fatigue and commuting across the country. So you still have to fix that part, but then you have to fix the training bottleneck, which they can't fix because they don't have enough check airmen. They don't have enough sim instructors. They don't have enough sim capacity to even maintain what they're doing. So I don't think any of this fixes that.
No. Yeah, I think Delta's having like record size classes, they're having like 60, 70 people per class, where I think normally it's like 20, the backlog of training it's a huge problem. There's no one solution. And the problem is no matter how many solutions you throw at it, it's going to take time. It's almost like a cultural problem at this point, because this is the way the system works. And how long is it going to take to right the ship? Yes, but this is not going to solve it 100%.
No. Well, and you make a good point too, is it's only going to get worse because culturally, back in our day, right? I got my pilot's license. It was like $3,500 back in the early 2000s. Yeah. How much does it cost 90s now? It's like 10. It's like 10 grand or more in a Cessna. Like these kids can't afford it. It's unobtainable for so many people, and what do you do?
Yeah, even renting a little Cessna to go out and try to build some hours. I mean, you're gonna
I would not have been able to do it I used my GI Bill and went to a school, and that's how I grinded out all those hours. And to Mover's point, 100%. I'm mixed on the 1,500 hours because I think there's legitimacy in the fact that you have to be exposed to problems in order to overcome them. And I think that the lower hours you have, the less likelihood you've had those problems. I know that's not a very great argument, but I flew with some of these young CFIs when I 2,500 hours, and I'm flying with a dude who's got 300 hours or whatever, and he's teaching me stuff, and I'm like, okay, listen to me, young champ, this is how this is going to play out. Like, you got me on the Cessna, right? You've told me everything I need to know about the Cessna. Let me explain to you why you should not have called to enter the Class B airspace, because we're on an IFR flight plan. Okay. True story. Great kid. Love him. True story. But so you got to have exposure to those things. Cause I remember my first flight in a 737 coming out of training, out of my OE, we lost cabin pressure. And I think like a young kid would probably freak the hell out. I was just like, all right, that's cool. Cause I've been shot at, I've had all kinds of stupid stuff happen to me. So I think having exposure to problems is good. And you're only going to get that with a lot of exposure to the cockpit and time. 1,500 is an arbitrary number, but at the same time, show me a number that isn't, right? Like there's going to be a very hard time to find a science that says 1,500, because for Gonky, for Mover, it could be 500 hours is all you needed to be successful. But some other dude, maybe he needs 2,000, right? And so it's hard. It's an accordion.
Yeah. Well, it's the quality of hours too, obviously.
Yes.
Right. If you're just staring at out the window for 1,500 hours, that's a lot different than like flying a helicopter in combat for 1,500 hours.
Yeah. Well, that's what a guy told me that flew at the 160th. He's like, some guys have 1,000 hours and some guys have the same hour 1,000 times. And that's really what it boils down to. Right. And unfortunately, though, that's what it is. Right. And I was stunned. I don't know why, but I was stunned going to that school, and all these very young junior CFIs are teaching stuff. And I'm like, man, aviation is weird, because in the military, you're trained by guys who, generally speaking, have a little bit more experience. I know in the jet world, you do have the dudes who kind of just rotate back into training right after completing, but still, you still have that, like, those older dudes who've been there, done that. And you got all these young CFIs. And I'm like, man, it's the blind leading the blind on a lot of this stuff. And that was kind of shocking to me. But yeah, having exposure to various situations, to various climates and all that stuff is huge.
That helped me in my helicopter training, because I could see somebody with 0 hours going, okay, yeah, whatever. And me with 3,000 hours, mostly of it in fighters, I would see a situation, go, nope, ain't gonna happen.
Right.
Not today, not ever. I'm not flying like this. And
right. Well, there's like legal weather and prudent weather, right? Like, it's
right.
like experience tells you, nah, I know the paper says we're legal. I'm not doing that. I'll never forget the same kid looking outside. We were flying up to Syracuse. I was in Trenton. We were flying up to Syracuse, I think. And icing was at like 8,000 feet. And so we were at like 6,000. I planned the flight for like 6,000, and he kept looking at the temperature, and it got to like where it should be icing. And I'm just cruising along, whatever. And, we're in the clouds, and he's looking outside. He's got his flashlight. He's looking at stuff. And he's like, I don't understand. He's like, this is icing. There should be ice on the wings. And I'm like, well, now you see experience, right? The knowledge, the wisdom tells you, that yes, there should be ice, but in the real world, it just doesn't always work out that way. And so, yeah, you got to have that experience.
All right. Well, moving on, because I don't want to get past Gonky's bedtime. Douglas, do we have any comments, sir?
We do. Let me get to the right part of the StreamYard here. We had an answer to the question about the meeting. It was the California state tax collectors who were whose situation was improved by your input.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Dang.
Roush 540 HP said, thank you, Mover and Gonky. I'm going through a tough time with becoming medically retired. Anyway, your mental health minute and task saturation video has really helped me. And I had to Google that acronym. It's
awesome.
Do you know it, Gonky?
You ain't ammo, you ain't shit.
Ordnance.
Yeah. That is ordnance.
Yep.
Aviation ordnance?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Aviation ordnance. Yeah, AO.
If you ain't aviation.
Awesome.
And we've got I'm on board with this. Now that Gonky has internet, let's get him a
His wife would leave
DCS-capable
him.
computer.
Yeah, Plexi. Hey, thanks, man.
Hey, she might like it better. Mine does.
Yeah. He get right in the living room, Gonky.
Oh, no.
And Mewtwo85 comes in with a couple of super chats. It's always a joy to watch you come together and talk about various stuff. You manage to present it in a way that keeps me entertained and listening, and also it's a joy to watch and listen. I love the mix of entertainment and education that I get out of these videos.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It's a good thing Gonky's pretty. That's what changes it.
Brings back.
Brings a level of quality to the show. I'm an Army guy outside of the aviation branch. I'm going to assume, how do I get enlisted personnel that don't care about aviation flying to let me do flight training?
Casmo, that's you.
How do I get enlisted personnel that don't care about aviation flying to let me do flight training?
Probably his bosses,
are you?
Maybe.
Yeah, are you saying like? Yeah. Good luck. I mean,
he's got a picture of his.
Yeah.
His
I mean, I assume there's different programs that you could get away from the Army. Like when my last 6 months in the Army, I was on career skills program. So I was basically active duty getting paid, but I was on unchargeable leave, and I was gone for 5-6 months doing all my flight training that I used my GI Bill. So those programs exist. You have to be getting out of the Army to use them. And the problem is that they're not a guarantee, right? So it's entirely up to the leader of that organization to approve it and how much he can approve. So I don't know that there's no like silver bullet, like, well, say this and you're going to be good. You got to have a leader who understands that if your time is up, that he's going to let you go and prepare yourself. And unfortunately, I hate to say it, there's just some leaders who are like, they're going to squeeze every ounce out of you right up until that last minute. And the challenge that you have, and I saw this a lot with NCOs in the Army, and I felt it myself as a commissioned guy for a while, is you feel like you're the thing gluing the unit together, right? Whatever it is, the part that you're doing, and it's like, oh, I have to keep doing it. You don't. Like, you are an interchangeable part to a large machine. You are a tiny little cog, and the moment you are pulled out of place, something else will fit in that spot. So don't let anyone tell you that you are totally irreplaceable, because that's a problem. That's a problem for that unit. If you're completely the one thing holding that thing together, that unit's going to fail, and they need to fix it, right? And that's not your problem. But as far as convincing somebody, you just have to work it, and like Mover says all the time, don't make them tell you no. You got to keep having the conversation, and don't be afraid to. I don't know if that helps, but that's a tough one.
No, yeah, and that's a good segue to pilot attrition in the military, because what you were just saying is literally the answer. In that,
Man.
I mean, what?
It's gonna be a whole
what do you
podcast.
think, Gonky?
It's gonna be a whole podcast topic here.
Why do we think there's such a retention problem for the military in general across all branches?
I can only tell you why I got out of active duty, and that is because I didn't have faith in my leadership in the Navy. That's the main reason why I got out.
People first, mission always. That's what they always say, right? People first, mission always. But
they had it in the
right
Navy.
Right up until they don't.
It was recruit the sailor, retain the family back then, and it was laughable, because I'm like, you guys are doing a really bad job. I saw a lot of families get destroyed, basically.
It boils down to options, right? What options did you have? You could stay in, and you either like it or you don't, or you could move on. And it's always cyclical. They always talk about the Guard Reserve, especially. It's cyclical. How are the airlines doing? If the airlines are doing well, pilot retention is not that great, because you can go make more money, work less, be home more on average, and go get your third ex-wife and your 15th boat and your second house and all that stuff. Which, by the way, when I was in training, they said always keep your FO wife and your FO house, or husband, whatever technique on. But my point being is, sometimes it's just economics. It's just, hey, Uncle Sam can never match the Cadillac a month club, or what it used to be. I mean, not that you're doing that now. Casmo, you actually talked about this topic or brought it up when we were chatting. What's your take on this?
I think it's culture, right? And I think it kind of talks about what Gonky's talking about. It's, I'm sure I can summarize why you guys joined the military to fly jets, because you wanted to fly jets, right? You wanted to do the mission. And it's the same for guys in the Army. It's the same across the board for pilots. And so it's like, I want to join to fly. And so when you start finding out that that's not necessarily 100% what they want you to do all the time, that's going to affect you. In the Army aviation, gets used a lot. Like it's the most requested like thing from like ground force. Like we want Army Aviation to be there. So we're constantly being sent out to do these training events. Like we'll come off a deployment and immediately go into a training rotation at the National Training Center, Joint Readiness Training Center or something. And so, like you said, you're away from home quite a bit, which you're still away from home in the airlines a lot too. But there's a balance of like, when I'm home, like I just got home a couple days ago, I don't need to pick up the phone for the next, week or so. And I'm making decent money to do what? Like it's the easiest job in the world. And I worked at Kentucky Fried Chicken. I'm telling you, this is the easiest job I've ever had. But I think it boils down to, I always make this joke that like the Air Force has been proving to us for years that money is not the issue, right? Because I've seen like the bonuses thrown out at dudes. You're going to tell me that I don't want to fly an F-16 anymore, or whatever, and this amount of money is not going to keep me in the cockpit. That tells me it's a culture issue. There's something going on internally. Maybe it's family, maybe it's whatever. Maybe it's leadership, because maybe I've had one or two bosses that I didn't really trust either, and I didn't think that they really were interested in taking care of me. Money's not the issue, and I don't think guys are necessarily going to the airlines 100% because of the money. I think they are just going because they can do something else with their life. I talked to a guy not too long ago. Yeah, I talked to a guy who flew F-14s on the podcast, and he went to the airlines. He's been there for a long time, and he was like, "I'm not in the airlines to fly." He's like, "I'm in the airlines because it allows me to do things that I want to do," and that's, I think, kind of the headspace of some dudes that go to the airlines. And then that kind of ties back in what we talked about before, where dudes don't want to upgrade because it's like, I'm comfortable. I'm making enough money, especially if you're like me, where you retired, you got your pension, you got disability. Like, I don't need to make that much. Like, but what I do need is to get the schedule that I want and be happy. Like if the amount I'm making is fine. So,
well,
yeah.
I'll say what? From the air.
Sorry, dude.
Go ahead, Gonky. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, Casmo was right. When I got out, it was, I turned down, it's like $25,000 a year bonus for the next 5 years, promotion to active duty 04, which is another $800 a month. I mean, right. They throw money at you, and it's, my friends that took it, there's a couple new Beamers in the driveway, like the next day kind of thing. And, it wasn't the money. And at the end of the day, Casmo, you touched on it. Like we all joined to do this awesome mission that was sold to us via good recruiting. And as time went on, and it's way worse now, but the, culturally speaking, the focus isn't really on warfighting anymore. And they spend a lot of time and energy on just other things that don't really matter. And if you're going to spend a lot of time on things that don't matter, you can do that exact same stuff at Delta, American, wherever, make way more money, never deploy, and, never get shot at. So why would you go join the military where they tell you to move every 3 years, put you in places you might get shot? Yeah. Why would you? I mean,
and your life changes, right? Like, I mean, I got 4 kids I think I moved 11 times, and I think it was on my 9th move where like my kids were old enough to have friends, right? Like at school and in the neighborhood and stuff. And you start to see that impact on them. And and the mission changed, right? Like I had a captain that worked for me when I was getting near the end of my career. And he called me one day and he's like, "Do you think I should stay in?" He's like, "Would you stay in if you were me?" And I said, "Bro, when I was you, it was 10 years ago. We were deploying, we were shooting stuff. Like we were doing the things that I joined the Army to do." I was like, "Are you feeling that right now? Is that what you're doing?" He's like, "No." I was like, "I think you got your answer." He was out of the Army a month later. Right. But that's like, yeah, why did you join? Are you doing what you wanted to do? I still think there's value in doing it. Like I hate seeing people get discouraged about joining the military because they should. Like, it's a great thing. I'm a completely different person than I was before I joined the military in a lot of positive ways. And I think particularly aviation, it opens so many doors because just like we talked about before, to get your pilot's license to go be an airline pilot, if that's really what you want to do that out of pocket as a civilian, that's incredibly difficult. Go join the military. If you can get a pilot's license there, you're golden. Like I didn't pay a dime, to get to where I'm at right now. So there's a lot of positives to it, but you got to go in with the right attitude and don't just go there to be like, well, I just want to use the military to get what I want. No, go there for the right reasons. Do the mission. You're going to be there for 10 years at least. But if it really feels like it's time to go, well, then make the decision and go, and don't just stay, because you're going to be miserable and it's just going to make it worse.
Yep.
Yeah, I've always said about the 10-year thing is just it's great until that point. And the thing is, I think there's two types at the 10-year point. There are the people that go, I just want to fly, and they find a way to go fly, whether it's through the Guard Reserve and then they become, the non-career track people. And then you have the career track people that do all the professional military education, all the Air War College, all that stuff. The problem, though, and again, views are my own and don't represent the DoD, is that the people that end up doing the PME, the professional military education, by and large, the people that want to move up in the ranks and that set policy are the people you don't want to do that. They are not warrior leaders anymore. They are not the people that the Robin Olds, because that's what, see, peacetime does that, right? Because we get people that just want to be trigger pullers and want to go and fly jets and do cool stuff with airplanes and become experts in their field. That is not what promotes. What promotes, because, for example, the Air Force, you promote against people that have never seen combat. You promote against people that have never gone kinetic in any training or otherwise. You promote against people that have no idea what it's like to make that decision, whether it's in a heavy or a fighter or whatever. So it is based on stratification. It is based on your professional military education. It is based on these metrics that have nothing to do with your job. And they promote these people, and it becomes a last man standing. I know you, Gonky, you know of a very good place in Florida right now that is the last man standing. It is the least qualified individual that could possibly take the job, because that's all that was left, and there's no one else that wants to do it. And that permeates throughout the Air Force. Is you get these people because they're like, well, who are we going to promote? Well, he did his Air War College and he didn't. Well, he's in. Oh, now we're going to add master's degrees to that. Now we're going to add all this other nonsense. Not, is this person a good leader? Is this person a good pilot? Is this person good at what they're doing? It's just simply, did they check the squares? And then they get into positions that are now policy makers. They start directing policy that has nothing to do with the job. It has nothing to do. It is all about, well, I know how to play these political games. I know how I knew him here, and I'm going to help him out. I'm going to give him top cover or give her top cover. It is political. So you get to these situations where unqualified people are in the highest ranks, and they should not be directing policy. And so people get out because they're like, if I can't do my job, why am I doing this? Why am I even here if our focus is everything but the mission?
Hypothetically, of course, right, Mover?
For legal reasons, that was a joke. None of that.
Yeah, there's nobody. Everybody above me is cool.
They're all
yeah,
good
I love
dudes.
Everybody.
Solid.
But I mean, my point being is, it's very rare now that you get the people that want to do that, because most people just want to go fly and that's it. And the Army did it with warrant officers, right? I mean, that was their career track. Is you didn't want to do all the leadership stuff. You just wanted to be a warrant officer and go fly, and that's your.
Yeah, you have that option. Of course, there's always still politics involved with that as well. But yeah, the thing that I always kind of tell people is what I've noticed towards the end of my career is it's like the same dude keeps getting promoted. And what I mean by that is it's the same archetype, right? Because if Gonky's like Mover and Casmo's not, well, Mover's going to promote Gonky, right? Like at the end of the day, like, oh, I know how he works. Like, and now it's carbon copy stuff. And you saw that. And then you saw the dudes who became chameleons, right? And they became what the boss wanted. And I saw that a lot, I mean, I don't know. I could get into it. I'm kind of sore on some of these subjects myself because of things that have happened to me and things that I've seen. But yeah, it's definitely troublesome. And I think people going in the military need to go into that with their eyes wide open about it, that you're going to have that problem. Gonky made the joke about the family first or whatever the Navy slang was. But, you hear about that a lot in the military. It's like, oh, character, sometimes it's character. Sometimes it's, did you go to war college or whatever, fill in the blank of military education or whatever sort of thing. And that doesn't necessarily translate into good leaders. And, I don't know much about Robin Olds, but the little bit I know about him, I think it would be very difficult for him in this current environment to promote.
Yeah. No. But first time we go to war, an actual shooting war, every
Right.
one of them gets removed, and
Yep.
you know, it's a cycle. It is the cycle.
Yeah,
Because
and that's history,
they
right?
won't be
Yeah, that's
able
not
to-
even an
yeah,
opinion.
that's- That's a historical fact. The weak, you know, hard times create strong men. Strong men create hard or easy times. Easy times create weak men, and then there you go. I mean, it's just a circle of life, and that's where we're at. We're at the point we've had 20 years of war, but from an Air Force perspective, it hasn't been a high attrition. You know, we need to figure this out. We need to pick ourselves up by our bootstraps. It's been, oh, well, you know what? You didn't deploy this year to Iraq, so why don't you go do a theater security package just so we can keep you deployed and, you know, keep exercising the machine? And it's like, you just ran off a bunch of people there because you did it for no reason, you know?
Yeah.
But
That's true.
all right. Well, Douglas, we got any comments? Has anybody said anything in the comments that I should worry about?
There's one or two left over from last time, and there's one I managed to lose somehow, so I'm just going to read it to y'all. Hi, Jackson here. I took my first flight in a mere Cessna and was sick the whole day. Is there any hope for me? Also,
Yes.
Gonky,
Yes.
can you talk about the T-45? It's my second favorite trainer. Are helis neglected in spending compared to fixed? So
Is this
take
all
those
one
in-
comment?
That was one comment. I mean, to be fair, he paid $20 for it. So.
He's got a lot of that to ask. All right, so I'll start with the thing. Yes, usually it's some kind of manifestation of apprehension, but typically it's just you got to power through it. We had Wombat on the show. He used to throw up in the loop. He got through it. If he can do it, if I can do it, anybody can do it. I always threw up on roller coasters. Gonky, the rest of the questions probably apply to you in the T-45.
Doug, part 2, that was T-45. Is that right?
Correct. He said,
Yeah.
can you talk about the T-45? It's his second favorite trainer. He didn't mention what his first favorite was.
Yeah, the T-45, I flew the A model, so it was all steam gauge. It was a British-built airplane. Had a little Rolls-Royce motor on it, non-afterburner. It was a great cross-country machine. It had its own little AP. We called it a GTS, gas turbine starter. But it was an awesome little jet to fly. The thing that I remember most about it, it is pretty small. I'm not that big of a person. I'm like 5'10", and it was pretty tight for me. We actually had a couple of taller. One of my buddies is a Marine. He was actually two of my buddies. One of them had to sign a waiver saying if you punch out, you're going to lose your legs. And the other guy, he couldn't operate the rudders. So he actually went, he was a Marine. He went from Jess to something else. I can't remember, but flying it was a lot of fun. You know, it's almost supersonic. And to be honest, it reminded me a lot of flying a T-38 in the sense that as soon as you start to put on a pull for a turn, you'd be like right into the buffet. And that airplane had, it had rudder shakers. So not only would you feel the buffet, but you the rudders. And then, so it wasn't really that maneuverable, but it was a really fun airplane to fly. And of course it was my first, real jet. And I loved it. I had a good time. They modified it for carrier ops. And when they did that, they kind of ruined some of the magic, if you will, aerodynamic wise. So anytime you put out the speed brakes, like if you're being led back in for an approach in the real goo, the speed brake drill was real dicey because they had to really heavily modify the landing gear, the airplane compared to the original Hawk. But it was very stable behind the ship, and it was very stable airplane like once it was configured. So pretty easy to fly. I liked it.
What was the rest of that, Doug?
You're right. I did miss a piece. Hang on.
Something about helicopters and cost.
There was a Casmo piece. Are helis neglected in spending compared to fix in spending?
I don't think so. I mean, from a big picture standpoint, I don't believe so. I mean, helicopters are just generally cheaper. The Army's got a ton. What people don't really realize is that the Army has, I think, more aircraft than the Air Force, has more ships than the Navy. Like, we just have a ton of stuff. But helicopters are generally not as expensive. I think an Apache Echo model Apache is like $50 million. So you compare that to, an F-22, which is what, a bajillion dollars. We're kind of coming off of the Comanche debacle, which we spent, I think, like $9 billion developing the Comanche, which was the world's first stealth helicopter.
I had that game. Yeah, I had that game.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
Comanche. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. When they cut that, A lot of that money got funneled over to the Apache, which is how you went from kind of the old school, I think, Delta models to the more modern Deltas than the Echoes and stuff. But generally speaking, I don't think so. I don't get that. I don't get that sense. And then of course now we've got the new tilt rotor. Was it the Defiant? That the Army just spent a ton of money on to have, which kind of segues into what we were talking about or going to talk about, which is the replacement to the Blackhawk. Very timely. Well done.
Efficiency. Casmo, that's you. I don't know.
Wait, Casmo,
about...
what was your favorite beer?
Yeah, there was another question there.
That was a beer question.
Yeah, beer. I don't know that I have a favorite beer. So you're gonna laugh because I like IPAs, but not because I like the flavor, but I like the high alcohol content. Because I'm just like I'm ready to just get to where I'm going. Like I'm not down for the journey of like I need to drink 6 beers. Like let me just get there now. So I don't know that I have a favorite beer per se, but yeah.
Gonky likes Bud Light.
Negative.
There's a whole thing we could unwrap there.
Here we
Yellow
go.
light.
You try this in a small town.
That's right.
Not in my town. All right. Well, did you actually have something for the new Helo to replace the Blackhawk? Because I don't know anything about it.
Yeah. So what we're seeing fundamentally is a shift in the larger idea of strategy, right? So a great example of this really is the Iran. We talked about it before. Iran hitting Al-Assad, right? So distance matters more than it used to. And jet guys are kind of used to being able to travel like, hundreds of miles to get to the fight and tanking up and all this stuff. Helicopters really didn't have that option, right? We could maybe have what's called a FARP, a forward arming refueling points. You'd fly out, get gas, get closer to the battle. But in order to avoid sort of the resurgence of artillery, because I for the longest time I would make fun of artillery guys and say, man, you're a dead branch, like you're just not bringing anything to the fight anymore. It's not World War II. We're not okay with destroying the whole town with your rounds. But now they're getting into this stuff they call it long range precision fire, so the ability to actually hit precision targets at a long range. Well, as you do that, you've got to push everything else back, right? So when I joined the Army in the late 90s, I remember you'd have an assembly area that was, just outside of artillery range, or maybe it was inside of it, but it was behind a hill or something. You can't do that stuff anymore. So you got to have distance. So when we look at things like using helicopters to get, bullets and people and all this stuff forward in what helicopters do, they've got to be a lot further back. So if you take a Blackhawk that's cruising at, 130, 140 knots, that's going to take forever. They're going to have to get gas a lot. So when you look at something like the Osprey, the ability to basically turn into an airplane, it's going to be able to cross long distances faster and more efficiently, and then transform into helicopters and do helicopter stuff. So the two, we had the Bell Textron, which is the tilt rotor, and then you had the I think I got it backwards. I think Boeing, is the Defiant. That's the tilt, the tandem rotor, the rotors on top of each other. So it doesn't really have a tail rotor. It counteracts each other and stuff. But both of these are designed to have more speed and more range and more capability. And so that's what we're seeing start to come out now. And that's really what this is about. It's a huge project. I think I read today that it's like the biggest helicopter procurement plan in the last 40 years. So that's kind of a big deal. But it's a fundamental change in how we look at helicopters, probably as big of a deal as you're seeing with the jets. Now stealth is such a big deal. I think this is probably our big transition, and mechanically it's a very different. I'm a purist. I don't like it because it looks not like a helicopter to me. I don't like tilt rotor. It just seems very strange to me. And obviously there's some mechanical issues that come with that. The tandem rotor supposedly is a really good choice. I wouldn't be surprised if we see the new attack helicopter eventually is going to be kind of a tandem rotor type thing. But yeah, that's fundamentally what's happening is you're seeing the Army is trying to do the right thing and put their money forward instead of just kind of keeping what they have going, right? It's like the perpetual B-52. We just keep making it last a little bit longer. They're trying to look forward and say, okay, what do we need 30 years from now? What's the future look like for helicopters in that fight? It's not a highly modified Blackhawk. It's this whole other hybrid type thing. It's a new technology. So that's what we're seeing.
When is it supposed to come online? Are we going to have the 47-year procurement plan before we actually see one in action?
No, of course not. No, I don't know exactly what the timeline is. I know initially, I was reading about this earlier. Initially, like the first payout was just for like a virtual, like it wasn't even the real aircraft. It was like, well, virtually it can do this, So,
Oh, wow.
of course, yeah. So of course, procurement's going to take. I mean, they have the real aircraft and it's doing stuff and it's got different tests it's got to pass and stuff, but procurement is difficult. Helicopter procurement is difficult because I talked about the Comanche and that went on for years and years and years. And I've talked to a Comanche guy who actually flew the thing. I was trying to get him on the
really?
podcast, but yeah,
that'd be
in the
awesome. That's
5
cool.
minutes I spent on the phone with him, I learned stuff. I was like, I had no idea this thing could do this. I'm desperately trying to get somebody to talk about it in public. But a lot of that stuff is still tight-lipped. But then you go back even further to like the 70s and you had the Cheyenne, the AH-56, I think, Cheyenne, which was revolutionary in its time and is sort of like birthed the A-10 because, no offense to the Air Force, but they saw money. They're like, oh, wait, hold on. Let's get involved in this conversation. Yeah, we like money. If we get a new airplane, we'll get money with it. And the Cheyenne had its own problems too. It was a weird helicopter. It had some stability issues, but it was revolutionary at its time. And it sort of kind of paved the way for the Apache and other things like that. And the gunner seat moved. I thought this was the weirdest thing. It's kind of like the Last Starfighter, dude's just like spinning around. That's not, I don't think I would be down with that. I think I would get sick like the commoner getting sick all the time. But yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But I think it's under dispute now. I think Bell won, but then like Boeing, of course, and this is natural, right? With every sort of like big government contract, the loser is going to dispute it and say, "Oh no, this wasn't fair."
But
so
Bell has the Valor, right? The new attack helicopter.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Have?
The Valor, and then the Defiant, I think, is the other one. Yeah.
Does the Army fly the Osprey?
No, that's just
so
Air
this
Force
is all
and, Navy,
Marines.
Navy flies it too.
The Navy has it too. Okay.
Yeah, I forget what they call it, but yeah, it's the tilt rotor to replace the C2.
Okay. Oh yeah, the COD. Yeah.
Oh,
all right. Well, moving on, because we're really close to Gonky's bedtime now. I've got a couple voicemails because we can do that now. If you guys ever want to do that, it's on Spotify. You can leave us a message.
So much better than mine.
Dude, just put it on Spotify. I'm not smart. I just do it. Here you go.
Hey, Mover, this is Como. My question is, I see you were at Eglin. I was also at Eglin. I was in the 39th Flight Test Squadron on this F-16s. Now, I've been separated since 1997. Are the F-16s still there, or have they moved on to the 35s?
Yes and yes. The F-35 is there, and also the F-16s are still there at the test squadron.
Both.
And that's it. Yeah.
Yep.
Hey guys, Bjorn here from Holland. I'm wondering, in Holland we fly the F-16 and they're being swapped in for the F-35 now. But in Holland we always call the F-16 the Fighting Falcon and not the Viper. I noticed that's a big difference. Do you have any knowledge about why they are called Fighting Falcons in Holland and not Vipers? Is there anything to know about? I'd love to hear it. Thank you. Keep up the good work on the show. Really love it. And looking forward to your next episode. Bye-bye. See you from Holland.
Yeah, Mover, why?
People who are intolerant of other people's cultures. I'm sorry. So this is I get corrected in the comments a lot because people are like, you called it the Viper, but there's only Vipers and whatever. So here's the answer. In the 70s, when the F-16 was in development, they saw the jet, the pilots and the maintainers. They had this thing, they put it out, and they said, name this jet. And everybody said the Viper because it looked like the Viper from Battlestar Galactica. And the Air Force guy at the time was like, no, we're not calling it that. So they said it's the Fighting Falcon. And just like the A-10 Warthog and, other jets where pilots have renamed it, Fat Amy, they did not call it that. So pilots and maintainers throughout history have called it the Viper. Eagle guys make fun of us and call it the Fighting Falcon because that's actually its technical name. And usually pedantic nerds that are like, not the guy who just commented, but in the comment section in general, they're like, oh, it's the Fighting Falcon. What are you calling it, the Viper? They like to correct you, but it's the Viper demo team. Where the confusion has now created internationally, why this has become an international thing, is because a couple years ago, the F-16V came out, and people were like, oh, V must mean Viper. And so Lockheed took that, and they were like, this is the F-16V Viper. Well, it's always been the Viper. It's just now there's an F-16V. And so people get confused, and they're like, well, that block jet is only the Viper, and anything else is Fighting Falcon.
Oh,
so when you go internationally, like the Hellenic Air Force, I think, is an example of this, where they have Block 52, those jets, but then they also have talked about ordering the Viper because they want the Block 70 or whatever it is, F-16V. That's just the difference. Every pilot and maintainer will call it the Viper no matter what. However, the official name is the Fighting Falcon. Questions on that?
We called it Fighting Falcon in the Navy mover, just so you know.
Of course you did. And you know what you have in common with the Eagle guys? I'm not going to say anything, but, there's a lot of similarities and
Yellow light.
Choices. And yep. Okay. All right. What's the next one? The last one on that one.
Hi, both. This is Richie as my hero again. If you were both happened upon the dildo of destiny and you went back in time to the Second World War, what fighters would you choose to go into combat with and why? Thanks, guys. Love the content. Keep up the good work. Bye.
Tell me more about this dildo of destiny.
I'm going to use that. I have to figure out a way to use that.
P-51.
Is it girthy?
I picked Corsair.
Corsair. Casmo, what do you got?
Oh, we're doing this again. P-38. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So we're just
two engines.
Okay. Moving on to the next segment.
2 engines is nice.
Today's mental health minute. Today's mental health minute is about channelized attention. Channelized attention occurs when all your attention is on one thing at the expense of things that you should be focusing on. This could happen in your everyday life. This could happen especially in fighters. It can happen in helicopters. Typically, it's a situation where something grabs your attention and you start focusing on it, but you still should have some level of cross-check, whether it's an instrument cross-check, your tactical cross-check, or even in your car. A lot of people get a text message and they will run into the car in front of them because they are channelized on that. So it is a threat in aviation. We usually combine it with human factors when we talk about channelized attention, task saturation, and misprioritization, complacency, or whatever. I talk about it as a mental health minute because in your life, if you get channelized on one thing, you can miss other things. And it's typically when something is very stressful and that's all you think about and your aperture is closed and you need to be wide. Around the room, guys, what do you have for this topic?
Yeah, I mean, channelize. I mean, flying low, flying behind the boat, it's a big deal. And like you said, in life, generally speaking, if you are, we used to call it, if you're STT on one thing, which is you're laser focused on just one thing. A lot of times you don't see, a lot of times you don't see change. You don't see the things going on around you that actually can really affect, whatever it is you're doing. For example, if you're flying behind the ship, it's meatball lineup AOA, right? If you just keep staring at the meatball, you're going to mess up lineup. That can be bad. They all can be bad if you just channel your attention on one thing and stay there. You got to keep your eyes moving, got to keep your mind moving, right? So, I mean, that's my plug on that mover.
Casmo.
Yeah, I mean, it's basic aviation stuff, right? You build your cross check and build that as your routine. I was thinking, it's funny, it made me think of something that happened a couple months ago. I was in another aircraft that was losing cabin pressure, and we had a flight mechanic on board. Don't fly with us. But we no, it's perfectly fine. We had a flight mechanic on board in the cockpit with us, and so the captain and him were both like trying to like figure out why. Like we'd already solved the problem. We didn't lose pressure or anything like that. It was just a slow leak, but they were like trying to analyze why. And we were kind of in like some skosh weather and stuff. And I realized I was getting sucked into this sort of conversation too. And then it's like experience stepped in. I'm like, we're not going to solve this problem right now. Like it's a mechanical problem somewhere in the jet that we're not going to climb out on the wing and figure out because it was some sort of like bleed air issue. But I pulled myself out and was like, okay, I'm going to pay attention to what the airplane's doing right now because these two boneheads are trying to figure out this stuff. So yeah, it's understanding cross-check, as a crew, obviously, and this goes back to what we talked about before, having two people in the cockpit for big jets is super, super important because of things like this can happen in a single pilot aircraft. Yeah, I mean, you got to have discipline. I mean, that's just what it boils down to, is you got to be a disciplined aviator and avoid that, because those things happen all the time. And we were talking before the show started, target fixation, getting very honed in on, especially when you're shooting something unguided, right? You're popping rockets off on something. You're like, the next one's going to hit. Oh no, the next one's going to hit. Next thing you know, you're the one that hits, right? So you got to have that discipline, and you got to build that essay of what's going on. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We when you talk about accident investigation reports, accidents, mishaps, a lot of times you can go watch air disasters on, the cable, and they talk about the plane was perfectly fine, but they had one little thing that they all focused on, and they didn't realize that they were stalling, running into the ground. Something happened. And so the next question, then, we talked about what's the problem, but really, how do you avoid it and how do you fix it? And it goes to Gonky's point, whether it's meatball lineup, angle of attack, aviate, navigate, communicate, you have to remind yourself that, hey, this isn't the only thing. I still have to do this other stuff. And so I have to bring that cross-check back in. Do you guys have any techniques on, if you see yourself getting kind of channelized, how to recognize it and go, okay, need to open the aperture back up?
Well, in flying, it's definitely training. Like Casmo kind of alluded to it. He recognized the fact that, hey, wait a minute, we're all staring at this one thing in an airplane that's cruising through the air. So, and that's just a result of his experience and training. As far as in life and other things, I think a lot of times, a friend or a family member, seeing it and pulling you out of it, because it's really easy to do if you're by yourself, right? Because I think a lot of times, whether you're in an airplane or in life, you don't even realize you're doing it. So, I mean, that's why having, iron sharpens iron as one man sharpens another, right? Keep good people around you. and these things shouldn't happen. If they do happen, you'll have somebody there to help you get out of it.
Casmo.
Yeah, I think it's hard. I don't think there's a 100% solution. I think it just comes from training and experience. Sometimes it comes from, the other problem is it's not just fixating on something that's happening right now. It could be fixating on something that's not happening at all, right? You're thinking about a conversation that you got to have, right? Like, when I land, I got to call so-and-so and deal with this problem. And so you start thinking about that. And so you got to be present, right? You talk about that. You got to live in the moment. What am I doing right now? What's the most important thing? And when you're flying, the most important thing is flying the aircraft. And like you said, aviate, navigate, and communicate. Yeah, for me, like, when I start to recognize that I'm probably like drifting off or my cross check isn't so good, it's like, take a deep breath, like 100%, just like try to get some more oxygen in the brain and try to wake up. The value of flying the big jets is you're like, hey, I'm going to stand up and stretch my legs and go kind of wake up for a second. But don't be afraid to ask for help, I guess, fundamentally is what it boils down to too. When you start feeling like you're drifting, if you're doing those long flights or something like that, or if you're driving a car, we talk about driving along, pull over on the side of the road, stop somewhere and get gas, or just get a snack, whatever. But
well, and it applies in everything. I get emails, firefighters and cops. I'm in law enforcement too. And, you can be on that traffic stop where you're focused on the driver or the passenger, and you don't catch the other guy that is about to, sneak up on you or do something bad. You're not watching their hands. So you have to remind yourself that you have to take in an entire situation and not just one thing. And that's just it. It comes with experience, and it comes with, before you have that experience, you have to just remind yourself. You have to go, fall back on your training and just practice, so you don't get stuck in that situation. So it's a good thing to talk about. Channelized attention is just as important to mitigate as it is as complacency and other stuff. So moving on, our final topic of this evening is make them tell you no story. I like to talk about this. If you guys want to email me, cwlemoyne@cwlemoyne.com. I've got a email that I flagged here. I thought it was good. This actually, I think it's from someone who's in law enforcement. He says, thought I would share my story. After my USAF enlistment, I applied to become a California Highway Patrol officer, like Ponch and John, which Gonky, if we had motorcycles, that's what we would do. During the application process, I was disqualified because my uncorrected eyesight was not 20/40. It was 2400 corrected to 2200. At the time, LASIK had not been invented, and PRK was new. That is PRK, right? Radial keratotomy was new with unknown long-term side effects. I decided not to do it. It took more of a year of work and dedication, but I was able to obtain uncorrected 20/40 for at least a couple hours at a time with the hard contact lenses and daily exercises. I resubmitted my application, again tested, but I failed just barely. I appealed the decision to the state surgeon general and was retested under stricter lighting conditions. I passed and became a traffic officer with the CHP. As a new officer, I started out in South Los Angeles, working the city streets in Compton, Watts area. I was on the front line during the LA riots in '92, along with earthquakes, floods, and Malibu fires. Throughout my career, I felt about the street like you feel about being in a fighter cockpit. I didn't want to leave it. I was where I was happiest and flat out refused the continual department attempts to promote me. While working the road, I still continued to push myself. Like most big organizations, my department had voluntary training available. I took the hardest training courses the department had and became an associate for one of our major investigation units. Being an associate, I had the opportunity to work complex investigations and be the lead investigator on several murder cases. As an associate, I was able to go back to the road after completing each investigation. I'm proud that I spent 21 years of my career as a field training officer teaching the road to newly graduated officers. After a successful career, I took my 30-year retirement. None of this would have been possible if I had taken no. The department gave me as the definitive answer. What you stress on your YouTube channel is spot on. Make them tell you no. Don't be a douche and continue to push yourself. I would add that if you want to be better than average at something, take on responsibility of teaching it to others. The last episode of Mover and Gonky talked about complacency. At the conclusion of every enforcement contact, I had trainees verbally tell me what they did wrong poorly with regards to officer safety. I would then give them my evaluation. I stressed that this self-critique was a habit they needed to keep throughout their career. I advised them that if they repeatedly reached a point where they could not think of anything they could do better, then it was time to turn in their badge and gun because they were a danger to themselves as well as others. There's always room for improvements. Feel free to share this with others if you think it's helpful. Thanks to you, Wombat and Gonky, for your commitment to help others help themselves. Sincerely, T-Shark. The T stands for traffic. And that is exactly what we were just talking about.
That's awesome.
That's another for channelized attention. The debrief, debrief yourself. Hey, what did I miss? What wasn't there? I mean, that's what separates fighter pilots from people who joyride. That's what separates military pilots in general. People say, well, Tom Cruise is a fighter pilot because he flew a fighter. You're not a fighter pilot unless you have that mentality. You're not a fighter pilot unless you have used this aircraft to employ or learn to use the aircraft to employ it tactically. And that is the separation of our professions.
Nailed it.
Casmo? Nothing?
No, it's good. I have a story, if I could share it with you.
Perfect.
That might be of
Please.
Value. So
Please.
make them tell you no type stuff. So when I got out of the military, going through my VA stuff, part of that was I got PTSD, a rating for PTSD, which immediately the FAA is like, well, that's not a good thing. I went through the process with them. I was grounded for 2 months. I didn't fly, which means I didn't make money. But it worked out, right? So I guess why I share that sort of truncated story to let people know that there's a lot of things that when you're trying to go into an aviation career that are kind of a turn off. Like there's certain things you can't get around. If you can't see, you can't see. If you're colorblind, you're colorblind. But don't let mental health necessarily work on it, right? Just go through the motions and do your best, and don't just automatically assume that, well, I've got this PTSD rating or I've got this other thing going on. It's going to affect me. Maybe it will, but go through the motions. Sometimes it's very difficult. It can take a really long time and it can be expensive. I got kind of lucky, I think, honestly, from that front. But I stayed the course. It was touch and go. I wasn't sure that I was going to come out on the other side and still be able to fly. But here I am.
Absolutely.
So I just try to share that with some people to encourage them, because I know that mental health is a big deal, and we need to talk about it more, and we need to understand it, and we need to not stigmatify it, but the structure, the culture, The bureaucracy is still playing catch up to that, and so it can be very intimidating. But man, for people going into commercial flying, do not lie on your medical.
Oh,
do not
no.
hide
Yeah,
stuff in your medical. For
absolutely
guys
not.
coming out of the military, do
Especially
not do
VA.
that. They are
Yeah.
looking. Yeah, they're looking.
Yeah.
The FAA and the VA talk, and there's some people that don't like that, and they think that that's unethical, and they think it's against your HIPAA rights. Brother, I'm telling you, I would like to know if the dude up front in the plane with 160 people in the back is having a bad day, if he's going to plow into a mountain. Like, let's go through the motions and make sure that people are taken care of. But that doesn't mean hide it. That just means go through the motions. And yeah, you might get grounded for a little bit, or you may not ever fly again, but do the right thing and don't hide it, because it will be unto you if you get caught trying to hide that stuff. So anyway,
That's just in general. I mean, in general, it's
Yeah.
always better to be upfront and honest. Don't play Ivor Secret. Don't
make them tell you no is not.
use your integrity. Integrity is a big thing, because once you lose it, you can never get it back.
yeah.
Mr. Producer, I understand that you have a couple comments before we wrap this up.
Yeah, there was some concern that maybe some of our viewers had been shadow banned, so I'm here to tell them that they're not.
They are.
Yes.
I'm
You
here to
are.
tell you
You'll
that
know.
is correct.
You'll know
Go
when you're
away.
banned.
Sorry. Yeah.
John Ross wanted to know, does anybody know pilots who are still fired for not getting vaxxed? And then
That
I
was a
don't
whole article.
understand that last sentence. Maybe somebody can
Pilots
help me
keep
out.
getting incapacitated in pilot seats. He's talking about the whole. I don't think so from any major airline. I think everybody's been reinstated. There was a bill in Congress recently that didn't make it law that they had to get their jobs back, but I don't know of any major airline that had a vax mandate. Because in fact, the United thing recently actually said Freedom of Medical Act. They said they couldn't fire them for that. So I don't think so.
And in the military, I think most are back. Some people.
I think if they ended up in the IRR, there's some
right.
process for them to get back. Some people just decided to stay gone.
Yeah.
All right. What else you got?
Thanks, John.
This is somebody, Master Sun 42's take on the retention problem. No more real retirement, poor leadership, pay difference in civilian. They took us out of the jet to make everybody a commander. PME, I'm assuming he means master's degrees. Some of us just want to be the best
professional
aviator
military
we can.
education.
Yeah, that's none of that is not true.
That's exactly what I said. Yeah, that's exactly what I said.
I can
But-
attest that's not unique to the military either.
My argument is that to be a good commander, you have to be a servant leader, and you have to be the one that leads you into battle. And that's, to me, you can't test that with professional military education. You can create a wider array, but you can't just say that is your only criteria to do that.
Yeah,
that's just me. Douglas?
I like this idea. You need to do this every April.
Whoever should do an April Fool's movie reaction next year. Former F-16 pilot reacts to Amadeus. What is that?
Well, that could be your reaction. A non-aviation movie. Let's leave it at that.
Oh, I get it. Yeah, okay.
I like this one. Retired E7 crew chief from the Air Guard here had a troop that had a PhD, and the Guard would not promote her until she got her AS degree from CCAF. Community colleges represent.
That's the community college of the Air Force, though, which is not
Wow.
necessarily representative of what you do.
That's wild.
We've had a PhD. Yeah, that's
wild.
That's silly.
Can't get out of our own way.
Casmo, that's perfect. That is just
Yeah.
plain silly.
Yeah.
Thanks, Eric.
Idiocracy is a documentary at this point. Next. Hold on. I got to put the...
That was it
views
for
don't
today.
represent, constitute endorsement. They're my own and don't. The beard should give that away.
By
All right,
idiocracy,
well,
we mean it's perfect. It makes perfect
Oh,
sense.
I think it's Brondo. It's got the electrolytes. So, what have we learned today? This is the longest episode. Thank you, Casmo, for the wealth of
thanks,
knowledge, entertainment, and stories. You are always going to be my hero.
Yeah.
The only thing I will add is to answer your question previously of why I thought helicopter flying was easier is because I watched all 3 seasons of Airwolf.
As one does. Yeah, woe be unto you to be a new pilot in a helicopter unit and not know what Airwolf was. We had those guys show up, and you're just like, what? What on earth?
Immediate
here?
washout.
Yeah, just get out of town. Go fill the coffee.
Dude,
pot.
I even thought
Yeah.
after becoming a helicopter pilot and watching Airwolf, I even thought that, you know, the whole lifting body thing when they lit the afterburners, because they disengaged the rotor. I'm like, well,
Did they? I haven't seen it in so long.
They
Yeah.
disengaged the rotor, so it kind of, when they go supersonics, I'm like, I got Gonky hook on Airwolf on the way back from Key West, COVID flag 2021.
You don't right. That was the best part of that whole event was watching.
It
what,
was
like
us,
4 seasons on the dash of the rental car. Now
there's only
aircraft-
3.
That aircraft crashed in real life. It became a medevac
Air
aircraft in
yeah.
Germany, I think. And
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Should be in a museum.
Anyway,
yeah. Should.
or should be flying again in Airwolf 2. Dude,
Starring
3
Mover.
people right here. Mover, Gonky, and Casmo. Gonky will be the girl that shows up in season 2.
Of course.
Casmo, you can be
I'm
Santini.
Stringfellow Hawk.
I'm
Oh,
Stringfellow Hawk. I'm Stringfellow
horseshit.
Hawk.
No.
See, I can do this. Play the cello. I've got a dog. It's perfect.
Oh, dude.
Yeah.
The cello.
Live in a cabin.
Yeah.
We just need to find a hollowed out mountain, and
Yeah.
then we're in business.
Ah,
That
we've
you
gone
can
off the
get
rails.
anywhere from, by the way.
True.
Doesn't matter where the
That
problems
nobody
in the
can
world.
follow you to.
Quickly.
Well,
you
you're
got to be able to get there
supersonic.
quickly from anywhere.
Yeah, but you can
Must
drive
have
to your Jeep.
caves there.
Yeah.
From your mountain cabin. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot going on in that show.
That best show
Let's
ever.
go back.
Gonky, what do you got, man?
No, nothing. Casmo, it's awesome, man. I love hearing those kind of stories, man.
Yeah.
They never get old.
Appreciate
Casmo,
you
we
letting me
appreciate
invite
you
myself
being
onto your show, man. That's good.
No, you did not. I invited you first. We're sorry that Gonky was busy the last time we tried this, but hey, you are always welcome on the channel. You add so much content.
Well, yes.
All right.
There's different ways
Mr.
to take
Producer?
it, but yes.
That's what she said. Mr. Producer, anything before we leave?
I've got nothing more.
Awesome. Thank you for your assistance. Thank everybody for watching.
Thanks, guys.
We appreciate it. I got to get rid of this. Okay. Thanks for watching. See ya next Monday.
See you guys.